All right, what's up, everybody? Sorry for being delayed for about a couple minutes. I'm a couple minutes late, but been been busy the past couple days, and not in a good way. Not in a good way. The reason the stream got delayed from yesterday was I did get a little sick. Thankfully, it was just like a little 24-hour bug, so nothing crazy, but just feeling a little weak. A little under the weather. But we got some good stuff to talk about that I really want to talk about. I didn't want to miss it because I think it's important, especially with what's going on in the Twitter spaces right now, right? And, you know, just the overall discussion. I think there's a lot to talk about. And I think there's a very good discussion to be made. Or to be had, right? And I just wanted to bring a medium to discuss said thing. Okay, that was the goal that I have. Now, how I thought long and hard about doing this because it's very risky, right? And I guess risky is the wrong word, but you have to control the situation enough to where it doesn't veer off too far in the same direction and then it just builds with momentum and gets out of control, right? So I thought to myself, what's a very good way to kind of do that? And I thought that I could just play devil's advocate basically for any comment or question that goes on in chat. I also have a bunch on Twitter and people have messaged me and stuff like that they want me to go over. So no matter what somebody says, if they say something positive, I'm going to try to defend it with what the negative side is saying and see if there is a reason, a logical reason that we can come to the conclusion of, right? Or if is the situation just being too positive for no reason, right? Because there is that situation. You can be overly toxic negative, you can be overly toxic positive where nothing progresses, right? It can kind of go in both directions, right? So if something's negative, I'm going to try to fight for the positive side on whatever said. It doesn't matter what it is. As long as it's said, I'm going to argue the case, not like fight or anything like that. I'm just going to present points for discussion of why that is not happening or why the opposite isn't happening. And then we can discuss it further, get comments, stuff like that. And like I said, come up with some type of middle ground. Maybe there is no middle ground, and that's perfectly fine. That is absolutely fine if that's not the case. And I suspect that will be the case for some of the talking points. And that's what we're looking for. We're looking for those talking points where there is no real middle ground that maybe we can present to LSS and say, these are some questions or concerns we have. They can, not answer them. They can answer them. They can do whatever they want. But as a content creator and as a person who just loves the game like I do and want it, and all I want is for the game to thrive. That's what I ultimately want. I think that's the best that we can do, right? If we can give them the best, most constructive feedback possible, they can take it and run with it, right? If it's not constructive, it doesn't really do a whole lot of good, right? So we want to avoid that situation, okay? So before we start hopping into questions and stuff like that, the way that this is going to work is I will not be keeping up with chat on the bottom. I'm going to start at the top and kind of move down. I probably won't be I'm going to try my best to keep track of everything, but bear with me if I miss something. Just repost it in there and I'll get to it, I promise. But first thing, I want to kind of preface why the timing on this discussion is important for me, right? Because the Fab community has been through situations like this before, right? We've had disagreements, whether it be Starvo or whatever the case may be, or, we've had a lot of disagreements in both positive and negative, right? And This one feels a little different, and I'll explain why. And for me, it didn't really click until I saw Roger Bodie on M&R podcast kind of uh, decide that he is leaving the game, right? Do I know Roger on a very personal level? Absolutely not. But he seems like a great guy and everything. But what I could see from his posture and the way he was talking about is he it it didn't seem like a situation where people need a break, right? It didn't seem like he just needed a break from the game. It seemed like he logically thought out the trajectory of the game and did not agree with it and left. Is what it seemed like to me. I don't know that for sure. I haven't confirmed it. It just gave that type of vibe, right? And that's also why he was kind of open to coming back if things change, stuff like that. So it kind of, it kind of got me thinking. And I thought it was definitely worth talking about for sure. So that's ultimately why I wanted to use this stream for, and also to kind of kick off the discussion. That's why I wanted to use this stream for this discussion. But to kick things off, what we're going to do is we're going to move over to a poll that I did on a couple days ago is when I started it. Now, it's very important to look at this. Like I said, I'm going to play devil's advocate for absolutely everything, even what I've posted, right? I'm literally going to try and pick this data apart because you can't look at that. You can't sit there and say that we don't care about the average. Like on the surface, the way a lot of people would analyze this data would be you take the average, you wash it because that's like just nothing's happening, right? It's hard to tell the state of the game when nothing's changing, right? Although there's an argument if it's not growing, it's dying. But, that's very hard to delineate or measure. So the easiest way to analyze this data would be to basically look at the average and then basically you look at the average, you wash that out, and then you subtract the smaller of the two into that, right? Is kind of what you could do like on the surface, right? So somebody, if they did not analyze this data correctly, if they did the wrong thing, what they could do is they could say, okay, above average, right? 19.7% and below average 48. So there's a 29% decline in the game, right? That would be wrong, okay? We can't analyze that data in that way, right? It's a very important point, okay? Very, very important. So with that being said, one thing that has to be accounted for, there's a lot of statistical factors that has to be accounted for. And some of that is going to be, if the store, basically the question I asked was your attendance at the ProQuest, the Armory, decreasing or increasing, right? And the best factor, right, is the fact that we don't know if stores are like, if more stores open in an area, right? Let's say that you live in the Chicago area, right? And historically, you've had 4 stores that carried Flesh and Blood that ran armories and ProQuest events, right? Let's say that number doubled, right, over a period of time. That would give the illusion that the attendance is dwindling, right? Which is a factor, right? So that we have to factor those things in. Can we actually do that without the data? Absolutely not. We can't. However, With that being said, you could also make the point of anytime there was a, anytime there is a, sorry, I'm trying to got in before him. Sorry about showing the chats. So basically, you could also make the argument that there are areas where the stores are closing, right? And theoretically, there should be a consolidation, and therefore, the number should be higher, right? That is a possibility. The reason why, and I knew this posting this survey. So somebody might have the question of, why did I post this survey of this if I know that the data might not actually reflect the answer? And sometimes the perception of something is more relevant than the actuality of something, right? Something could be absolutely true or false, but if it's perceived otherwise, and it's convincingly enough perceived, then you could be persuaded that X is correct, or X is going good, or this is going bad, whatever the case may be, right? And so my goal of making this survey was to simply, my goal was basically the goal was I wanted to get an idea of the perception of the community, whether it was correct or not. The goal was to get the perception. And with that being said, that was what I was looking for, right? Because it's what I noticed, right? And it also kind of caveats off of something else that we will discuss really quickly. Let's talk about a post that I made earlier where I talked about basically the B&R announcement. A lot of people saw this. Basically, my point was I agreed with the banned and restricted announcement of no changes, but I didn't necessarily like the reasoning, was my argument. And specifically in that kind of critique or criticism, if you will, I mentioned, I think it was right here, where I mentioned, it would, of course, completely gutter if you ban Voltaire. Is that not a better outcome than hoping bright lights is enough to make people reluctantly go to their CC ProQuest? And so ultimately, what I was trying to accomplish with the survey is to kind of see if that was a correct statement. And all in all, from what people have told me, what people have, I have no way to factor in people complaining, scream louder than people not, I have no way to factor that in, but mostly what I've seen is the fact that, people had there was less attendance at these ProQuest, and people seemed not quite as thrilled to go, basically. However, I will caveat that real quick by saying that I will say that anywhere international, it seems to everything seems fine. I went through every single comment people left, and anytime somebody mentioned anything overseas, it was always positive. Okay, that's one thing that that's one kind of something that was in common with all the comments. Or I say overseas in correlation with the US, right? And so like a lot of European places were packed out, absolutely full, and places in Asia, everywhere, right? But in the US is kind of where we saw a lot of data points like here, right? Packed out, right? 65 people at a ProQuest, right? But once again, we don't know how much of that is that the only ProQuest they got, right? Within like the X amount of area, right? We just don't know. And so it's kind of hit or miss. And some of this could also be a scheduling issue, right? Some of it could be, what if the OP program for Flesh and Blood has not restricted it enough for the game to where if you basically, 2 stores within X mile radius cannot hold the same event, right? Maybe something like that needs to be incorporated. Because there are a lot of instances that I personally have witnessed, right? A good example is I went to Atlanta for a ProQuest last season, and there was like 10 people because there was 2 on the same day. There was 30 people at that one, and there was 10 people at this one. Do you think the store with 10 people at it got a ProQuest this season? No, they did not, right? It's not the store's fault. It's the fact that 2 were on the same day, and 1 was kind of more centralized and closer to everybody than the other. So they just got shafted, right? And I don't know how LSS runs their OP program as far as who qualifies for what events, but I would imagine that one of the disqualifiers for a store would be low attendance, right? Because that's the easiest way to say, oh, they didn't have a lot of people show up, don't give an event, or reduce the events in the area, when it has nothing to do with that in that situation. If nobody would have showed, if they would have done it on separate days, I guarantee you 30 people would have been there, right? At least that ProQuest season. I can't say the same for this one because, it is what it is. But I kind of wanted to kick off the discussion with that, just as a starting point, get some questions in chat, and then we will start just batting at them, right? Let's go ahead and let me go up. I'm going to come, the person who posted before the stream started, I'm going to come back to those questions if they're not already answered. And we will discuss those. Of course, Vero's in there. Oh, yeah. And when you guys stop answering or asking questions, we're going to bring Vero in here as another layer of devil's advocate, if you will, and kind of get some hot takes, if you will, from him. Okay, so first question from Andy. Do you think it might make sense to flatten the LL point structure to give more points for smaller events and less points for larger events? Not a dramatic change, just small adjustments. Okay, so what you're suggesting is they do the opposite of what they're currently doing. You want to give more points for smaller events and less for larger. Well, if you did that, let's assume that you're keeping the same mathematical ratio, right? Because I'm sure when they designed the LL system or the most recent revision, they took the number of heroes that are going into, they came up with a number, right? Let's say 16 CC heroes. And then they said, okay, if 12 a year come in and we need 12 a year to come out, then they need to distribute 12,000 Living Legend points. I'm assuming that's how the discussion went. So then you need to tailor your OP program accordingly to, in some way, present 12,000 LL points, right? So if that's the case, then if you're assuming taking the same number that they've delineated that they need and just changing the distribution of that, you could say sure, but I don't know what that changes, right? Now, if you are talking about kind of like what you are, actually allocate, if you're talking about overall speeding it up, then that's another discussion to be made, which I think is mentioned. Yeah, 6 to 9 months. We'll bring that point back up. So the fact that Dromai was below 150 beginning of the year, and I recommended people to play Dromai and it was safe, and now it's not in 1 year, feels bad. Okay, so it seems like a lot of the questions so far are revolving around the living legend system. Okay. So let's go ahead and hit all things living legend, right? For those of you who don't know, I kind of have a predisposed stance on living legend. I think it's a very tasteful thematic system. I did make a kind of a joke at it, saying, that this is kind of like the Let It Ride zone, if you will, right? And basically, LSS becomes paralyzed at this point because, for some reason that I can't identify, they don't want to hit things when they hit this area unless they are like a severe problem, right? And obviously that's a relative statement. So I love the thematic aspect behind living legend. I love, it's a way to incorporate some type of rotation into the game, which is kind of somewhat necessary. But let's break down the living legend system, right? And kind of figure out so your main point was you want to recommend a deck to somebody, right? And then it be safe, right? For X amount of time. Okay? Now, I didn't play Magic a whole lot, pretty much at all, but if I'm not mistaken, you had the standard rotation, right? That lasted about a year. And theoretically, if you were going to play Dromai, right? Theoretically, since its release, you've had over a year already, right? But I get what you're saying is like not too long ago, she was sitting at 150 and now she's halfway there, right? The point that I would argue is LSS's accomplishment in lowering the price of the cards via whatever they're doing, it's working, right? If you look at Dromai as a whole, what does that deck actually cost to make, right? You buy Furnace, Crown of Dominion was like a $30 legendary, I think, like not that serious, and then your tomes, right? And then your staples that are in any other deck, right? So really, Dromai as a deck is very, very cheap. If you take out, if you with tomes and Furnace kind of excluded, right? Those are like the only cards that really cost anything. So I would kind of combat that argument with they're making the game cheaper, which basically relieves that situation, right? And obviously that has like a price sensitive stance. So, that person that's obviously worried about investing in a deck, maybe they just don't buy the tomes. Maybe they only invest in a Furnace, right? And then maybe they can pivot to FAB after, right? Kind of keep yourself open. That would be kind of the best situation that I could kind of come up with, is the fact that they are fixing the prices. Because we remember back in the day when a CC deck cost, even without the staples, it cost you several $100s. And now it's just not the case. Once you get the staples and you have a rotating set of staples, it doesn't cost a whole lot at all. Yeah, I know Tome's not $30. Or how much is Crown of Dominion? I don't even know how much that is. Okay, we had a comment that said, I'm trying to catch up, trying to go to the top, not miss the questions, and then also interact with you guys. So the LL system sometimes feels incredibly spiky. Dash was solid, but not meta by any means, but 1-2 callings during the Phi Oldham Icelander, and then 20% of her being gone. It would be nice if it wasn't. Okay, so you're referring to the spikiness, and that also revolves around the first question we asked, right? We cannot accomplish resolving the spikiness of the LL system by changing the point distribution, right? Because you can say that you're going to allocate more points at ProQuest, and you only have two options in this scenario. Because if you change the distribution, then the spikes will happen less frequently, but there will be a massive spike during ProQuest season, RTM, because there are so many events, right? There's only two ways that you can mitigate spiking within the LL system. That is, first, you can increase the amount of points or decrease the amount of points, distributed, right? I doubt that'll happen because they just revised it, right? Like, they just got done doing that. So I highly doubt that they'll do that. The second thing you can do is balance the game more, right? If one hero is... Because one thing that, like... This might be considered a shot, was like this article right here, basically stating that Dromai has the same amount of points as Lexi is kind of whack, right? Like, yes, that is true. That is a fact. But 100 of Dromai's points came from spiking one large event. So it's not, you cannot say that Dromai is on an equal playing field as Lexi off of that data point. Speaking meta-wise, that could be perfectly fine. But like if a deck wins Worlds and gets 300 points, and then one deck never loses and gets 300, like there's a difference there that you have to be able to delineate between the two. So that's really the only two ways that they can tackle the spikiness within the LL point structure, right? Is simply to make it longer, which they've already kind of doubled down on how many they need to leave and enter the game, right? They've already come up with their number. Because I literally think the last revision on Living Legend was like not even 3 months ago, maybe 4 or 5. It hasn't been that long. It's been fairly recent when we got the new revision to the points. They actually sped it up, if I'm not mistaken, right? Didn't they keep everything the same except for ProQuest? It was right before Nat season, I believe, is when they revised it. So if there's any more questions about the Living Legend system before we move on, please post them in chat. I'd love to get to them. I do agree. Unironically, I do agree with the wise guy. I mean, there will always be a best deck, and therefore, if millions and millions of reps are being done in the game, it'll be found, right? However, let me counter that argument. Because I understand what you're saying, and I kind of agree with it, but like I was starting at the stream, I said I was going to play devil's advocate for every single point, no matter whether it was positive or negative. Okay? What happened during the Oldham meta, right? If Oldham wasn't like accruing, an astronomical amount of Living Legend points. In fact, the only reason that he really went to Living Legend was Michael Fang took down the Pro Tour on it and got like what 300 points or whatever it was, 200, and just like knocked. But like, you know, if the delta between the top 3 decks is much smaller, then theoretically your Living Legend points should be more evenly distributed, right? Whereas this is not a case of this is look, you could say that Azalea is like toe to toe with Lexi because she's got like 100 less Living Legend points this season. But if you take away the calling, she's only got 36. Right? Like, congrats on Justin taking down the calling. You know, awesome. He deserved it. But like, the data is the data, right? And if half of every event is Lexi, it's not just a question of it's the best deck. It's a question of it's the best deck by X kilometers or X miles, right? And you know, Dromide's just now been in a position where she can start competing with cards like Tome and stuff like that. So I do agree with what you're saying. However, I would caveat that with if the delta between the top X amount of decks is smaller, then, you know, the distribution should be more even. And Lexi shouldn't just be up and out of nowhere in X amount of months, right? That is my thought process. So let's go ahead and let me make sure I didn't miss anything on Living Legend. Sorry if I missed anything. Like I said, just repost it if I missed it. I haven't gone all the way down. I'm just trying to scroll up and down, just trying to, like, as I'm talking about it, kind of see if anybody's making comments, stuff like that. People always complain about something, though. That is correct. Yeah, but like, and like Vero said, like, people complain, but I think people voted with something else than just their words on this most recent poll that I did. Right? I mean, like, I don't know. I think Flesh and Blood is a community. We'll deter from the subject for just a second. The reason that I chose for the title of the stream to be The State of Flesh and Blood, the good, the bad, and the passion, was one, it's like a spinoff of The Good, the Bad, the Ugly, you know? But like, also, Flesh and Blood, I don't know what it is. I've never, ever seen a community that is as passionate as the Flesh and Blood community. And that goes twofold, right? I don't know if it's because, like, FAB players are like refugees from other card games that feel like they've been, you know, taken advantage of, and they're just scared to death that anytime they see a sign that it's like going to turn into that situation, right? That's probably what's motivating the negative side, right? But I've never seen anybody on Twitter be like, yeah, I don't like that, but like, it is what it is. I've never seen that. It's either like, I don't like this and I'll die stating it, or I'd love this and I'll kill you for stating that, right? And like, it's just the extreme on both ends, which is another reason why I wanted to have this this discussion. And I wish I had some like data point on like FAB players being refugees from other card games, but like, I don't have. But that's the thing, like, Twitter's not a cesspool. Twitter is a great way to communicate. And yes, if you you know, I just think there's a lot of passion behind it. And I think that people just love the game and they want to stay around, right? And if something bad is happening to something that you love, you're worried about it going away and stuff like that. And I think people just get emotional and tied up in it, and that's basically the thought process. But I don't have a reference point for that statement. That's just what I've observed. I've never seen such a passionate community, which is a great thing, right? That means we all care. It means we all care. Okay, so we're gonna move on from Living Legend unless I missed something. Let me skim through the chat real quick and make sure I didn't miss anything on Living Legend. Also think the Living Legend system is the healthiest version of force rotation in any card game. Yeah, I mean, like I said, it's super thematic. It is good, but I do agree with the spiking, right? The spiking is no fun. And as long as this situation doesn't happen where, it becomes, the let it ride zone, as long as the Living Legend format numbers are not persuading LSS to either take action or involve inaction, right? Then it's an amazing system. It's when a hero has a certain number and then it's just to let it go. That's when the Living Legend becomes a negative. Not as a whole, just it is a negative aspect of the system, right? It is a flaw, if you will, right? Let's see any other. Let me make sure I didn't miss anything. Donkel's killing me. As a player who's dabbled here and there in Fab, but now I'm getting way deeper into the game, I believe now is a great time to join the game. Is that you're dialing back the power level. Are you wrong? You are not wrong. Let's open that discussion. Let's talk about the power level, the Lexi, situation, and let's talk about, was it a mistake to not ban Voltaire or whatever the case may be, right? Let's have that discussion, okay? Make sure. Just want to make sure I didn't miss anybody. Like I said, if I miss you and I've already discussed something that we, have talked about, then just repost it. I will promise I'll get to it as good as I can. What if a hero is at like 950 and they start unbanning things for that hero to kind of press the gas? Yeah, no, let's not do that. Well, that's what we're going to talk about. So he said if we ban stuff to keep it from making a hero achieve LL, what's the point of having LL? That's a fantastic point, and we will use Lexi as a reference point and talk about that right now. Absolutely. Okay. Shout out to Marvin in the Discord for posting this. It kind of, obviously it's a meme, but like it's kind of true, right? Phase 1, they decided to turn down the power level, right? We saw that basically everything post Everfest. We saw that it's just been a constant toning down in the power level, okay? And then James White and Brian Gottlieb have all stated that they plan to have a, I don't know if they refer to it as a phase, but like they want certain things out of the game, or not want stuff out of the game, but they're planning for certain things to be out of the game, aka I think they've mentioned Voltaire specifically, and they have a different vision for the game. as far as like power level and stuff like that. And I think everybody here in chat would probably agree. Yeah, Brian specifically mentioned that they turned down the power level. Yep, absolutely. And also, so they have an envision where everything's more balanced, okay? The question is did they execute phase 2 properly? Is the question. Well, that's a great point, right? Tome of the Imperial Flame. It is good, but I'm not sure it's as broken as people think it is, because there are a lot of deck building restraints behind the card. I think that if you were calling for a ban on Tome, I would say Frailty is a way worse offender, right? Yeah, Codex of Frailty. Yeah, all the spikes in Living Legend points are due to singular cards, not really a mass of them. Is the crazy part. So phase 2, I guess the thing in question is, are they approaching the phase 2 in the best way possible? And that's a valid question, right? So what they decided to do was basically they chose to ban nothing. And like I mentioned in the post, I said that, why sacrifice a ProQuest season just to have why sacrifice a ProQuest season just to have a hero actually achieve LL, right? Because everybody said that Voltaire is a problem, right? Everybody has said that. James White has said that. I think some other devs have said it. Like, just everybody knows that Voltaire should not be in the game. So why are we not banning it, right? Well, so somebody in the chat made the point of, what's the point in the LL system if you are hitting them with a hard ban before they actually hit Living Legend? And in all actuality of it, it has nothing to do with where they are. My reason for advocating for a ban on Voltaire during the last BNR announcement was ban and suspend announcement, was because the meta has not changed, right? Like, it's been Lexi dominated since Baltimore, right? And Baltimore was what, in March? Like, nothing has happened. Nothing has happened. Nothing's changed. It's the same thing. And I think people are just tired of it. So it's not I'm not advocating for any ban on Icelander, and she's around the same mark, but she had a much more natural progression, right? She's only at 844 and she won Worlds, right? She won the biggest tournament Flesh and Blood's ever had, and she has less points than Lexi, right? And it's not about total points. It's about the way that they were accumulated. Icelander and Dash and Viscerai have all accumulated LL points in a natural, organic way. Maybe not Viscerai, because he attained most of his via Skeletor, right? Which we know is broken, right? And let me get caught up on chat, see what anybody is saying. Tomish chill, take rake. Oh. They have to start creating less powerful cards. Well, that's the thing. That brings us back to this, right? So if this area is overtuned, right? They were like, "Oh shit, well, let's tone it down," right? And this, obviously, every set that they basically print has to be at a lower power level, right? Which they have obviously accomplished, right? With the exception of a few select cards. Dust Till Dawn didn't have a whole lot, but like, there were a couple cards, Starstruck, Carapace, stuff like that. And Bright Lights Head Tome and Dust of the Chrome Caverns. And maybe Twin Drive, right? So they have accomplished scaling down the power level. The question is, why not delete the thing that we've all admitted should not be in the game, have a fresh PQ season that everybody's excited to innovate and, like, I don't know how else to put it. Like, Lexi's been dominant for so long. These wins are not innovation. I don't know who needs to hear that. And a lot of it is the dichotomy between Lexi and Dromai, right? The stuff that beats Lexi loses hard into Dromai and that kind of situation, right? But we have been trying to, as players, put our heads together and combat Lexi for 9 months. We've been trying ever since Outsiders dropped. I don't know when that was exactly, but we've been fighting that deck for 9 months, and this deck has been doing the same thing. They even printed a card that literally said, hey, I'll turn off your hero ability with Warmongers. And they said, okay, I'll just use Trench. Right? They literally printed hate. And Lexi has a large enough card pool to where she just overcame it, right? Just because of a card that Riptide needed. Right? Like, there is no innovation to beat Lexi anymore. It's either bring the deck that's bad into Dromai, aka not so much Azalea anymore, but like Azuri or whatever, Arachne if you want to go to the extreme, right? Or bring Dromai or Lexi. Like it's the same equation it was as soon as Oldham left, and it's been for 6 months. So why not? And that goes back to the point, why are we actually doing heavy bans before a hero hits Living Legend? Well, I would be honest with you. I don't understand the bad part about Lexi staying at 950 points forever. Who cares? Right? I think we're gonna kind of deviate a little bit. And basically, what I'm worried about for LSS is that we will lose so many players in this phase 2 that they'll never see the amazing gaming opportunity in phase 3. That's my biggest fear. I think that's like literally. I don't know how else to like. I don't know how else to put it. Like, I think the toning down of power and product, plus the riskiness of Bright Lights as a set, plus the stale meta that we've seen for 6 to 9 months persisting through the ProQuest season is going, like, I don't know. I just think there was a better way. I was worried about it. I voiced my opinion. I said, that I'm worried about the game you know, it being stale, whatever the case may be. And everybody in this chat believes in phase 3. Okay? I don't know why everybody else started playing Fab, but for me, it was James White, right? I saw James White, and it was somebody that I knew cared more about just the stuff that I care about, right? A great game, a good experience, and then like business stuff second. He seems like a guy that understands that if you make a great product, that everything else will just figure itself out. So as long as James White is at the helm, like I'm not worried about the game not being good. What I'm worried about is that they're intentionally crafting a lull period that could impact the game. And I think the message that they're trying to convey is like, please just be patient. But look, you know, there's Dallas attendance was at 280 people. 280 people. If I'm not mistaken, the smallest calling level event we've ever had in the U.S. was Indianapolis earlier this year, and it was like 500 people. Right? So we've had almost half the attendance on a calling level event. And I'm just also, side note, LSS. If you see this, if you hear this, please, for the love of God, never schedule a calling on ProQuest or RTN weekend ever again. Please. Like, that's not a tough one, right? Because there was the foresight on it for Melbourne, right? They said, okay, there's a ProQuest season in Melbourne, right? And you have you extended theirs and said, okay, we'll do them in the first 3 weeks, and then the 4th week will be the calling. You could have done the same thing in America. Would it mean that you have to do ProQuest 1 week, then a break week for the calling, and then 2 more ProQuest? Sure. We're adults. We can handle it, right? We can figure out that there's not ProQuest for that one weekend. But as a competitive player, you should not put us in the spot of, do we go to a calling or do we go to our local ProQuest and support our stores, right? Because what's also going to happen is what I mentioned earlier in the stream is there will be a shop that has a very heavy competitive, people that are very competitive play at the store, and they're going to go play the calling because that's what competitive people do, or the highly competitive people do, right? They travel for the events, right? And they're not going to be there for the ProQuest. So when you get the report back that says, hey, there's 10 people at this ProQuest, then you're not going to give them another ProQuest based off of my experience, right? And that's not fair to them. You can't expect LGSs to be so in tune with the OP program that they just know to not schedule it around callings, right? Half of them probably didn't even have a choice, right? Because you probably give them time blocks and stuff like that. But at the end of the day, please don't make me pick between the two. Please. Battle hardened level events are much more like localized. That is fine, right? That makes perfect sense. But a calling, something that is supposed to be like a national event, you're dragging so many players away from these communities for these ProQuest events. I mean, effectively, if you want to look at it from a financial perspective for the LGSs, what you did was you took 280 entry fees for ProQuest and gave them to SCG, right? And that's not, I don't know. That just, it doesn't jive, okay? I can't play devil's advocate on that one. It's just wrong, okay? So, I don't know how else to say that. No callings on the same weekend as ProQuest or RTNs. Just bad business, bad business. I know that stuff's got to be done far in advance, but got to just figure it out. I don't know what else to say. Just can't be doing that. So let's go back, catch up on chat a little bit. God, this is hectic. But I like it. I feel like we're actually talking about some stuff. I feel like, oh no, my chat's like going away. There's so much of it. This is good though. This is good. Yeah, scheduling thing is actually a problem. I've run into skirmishes. Yep, 2 on the same day. Yep. Okay. Where I talked about that one. It feels like LGSs are punished for outside their control. Big story. Yep, we talked about that. Does LSS need to be more heavy-handed with bans moving forward? 3-0. I think they do bans accordingly. I just think that if you openly admit a card is a problem for the game and as the way it's intended, aka Luminaris and Voltaire, just ban it. I don't think that saying that the hero will sit there and be irrelevant for X amount of year, it just does not make sense. Unless there's something I'm missing. Now, maybe I'll give them the benefit of the doubt, and I will say that maybe they just like need frostbite mechanics out of the game to accomplish X goal. Then like, okay, my favorite part of playing Flesh and Blood is RTNs and ProQuest. I get to see buddies that are local, friendly faces. It's always a good time. I get to go to a bunch of different smaller events. It's not like a lot of pressure all on one event. You get to break it up. All of my best memories are from ProQuest and RTNs. I'm just spitballing here, but I would think that the ProQuest season right before the World Championship should be the apex of the year. And I don't think we need to be a data science to realize that that is not the case currently. LL system, somebody, yep, we talked about the spikiness of the LL system. I wasn't trying to speed, yep. Just want slightly smaller swings. Yep, just talk about the spikes. Yep, exactly. We already talked about that. Game not being sold in Target or Walmart is big. They'll never make that move simply because they want to support the LGS. If you offer anything at Walmart or Target, you're just asking people to not. I'm gonna be honest with you. I don't think the product would even do good enough to keep shelf space on Walmart. I'm gonna hit you with that hot take. At Walmart, you need items that have very high volume to sell at Walmart, and I'm not sure that LSS would cut it. I don't even think that's a choice that LSS could make. But even if they could, I don't think they would, and for a good reason. They want to support the LGS, all for it. Bright Lights, in my opinion, isn't newbie friendly. I have heard people say it's complex or confusing. That's okay because people can learn, right? Not everything has to be super basic like WTR, right? We have to scale the game in some way, make things exciting. I think Evos are like super exciting concept, right? Like from a dev perspective, the Evo system is like a home run, right? It's so unique. Is it game breaking in CC? Hell no. But like, it's unique, it's flavorful, it's on point. Like, the shit's just good. But is it a little complex? Sure, but that just takes time. If I were to recommend a deck, we already talked about that. Yep. Sorry, I'm trying to get caught up in chat. People need to remember that you don't need to build a Pro Tour winning deck list to bring to an armory. That is true, but the game as it stands currently, they are progressing in a way that does open up a more casual format. And that's another point that I'll make. Earlier in the stream, I mentioned that armories in ProQuest of anywhere in any country that has more like newly adopted the game, like Japan, Brazil, stuff like that, like the game is thriving, right? And I've also seen a bunch of data points where like the people in those areas are not playing the most meta deck, right? And people are having a blast, right? And I mean, that's a good point. But at the same time, when the reason that you need, a lot of people are bringing Pro Tour winning deck lists, armories, is the XP system. Let's take somebody that has no elo and is trying to get to nationals, and they don't think that they are going to get an invite at an RTN or a ProQuest, right? They are going to load up at every single armory, which great for the LGS, that puts people in the stores, stuff like that. But they are going to bring the most sweaty try-hard deck, and they're going to make sure everybody remembers their trigger at the armory so they can get that 3 XP to earn that invite, right? I'm not saying that every single person in the top 50 is doing that. I'm just saying that that could play a role in some of it. There's some people that are just astronomically good for the community, like Michael Fang, Brody Spurlock, people like that just play the game every weekend, right? Or I think Brody probably goes to 4 or 5 armories during the week when he's not in a battle harden, right? And like, that's fine. Like, hell yeah. But, there's a lot of situations where the XP system does incentivize competitiveness at the armory level. Sure, but what if we're losing all the games? Isn't fun? Yep, and that's another thing. I actually was completely oblivious to this when I started the game. When I started my FAB local community, it was me and one other person, and we played a 2-person armory for 3 months before we got it rolling. And we finally got it up to 8, 10, even up to like 14, 16 at one point. Solely off the back of both of us. Shout out, Adam. I doubt you'll see this, but thank you for bearing with me and having somebody to play with for those 2 months. I really do appreciate it, Adam. But we just played games like all the time, right? And I was trying to be competitive, right? I was trying to do the best thing. I'd bring chain and I would try to like play the best deck I could. And somebody walked up to me and was like, "You're going to scare players off." And I was like, "What do you mean?" He's like, "Nobody likes to come in and like lose all the time." And I was going as far. I had a rule that if I won the armory cold foil more than one time a month, I just gave it to whoever got second. So I would only take 1 copy, right? And that's a rule that I had, and people just still hated to lose, right? And I understand it. I understand it. But that's this game. Any game with a long learning curve is going to have that as a consequence. That's just anytime there's a skill gap between potentials and somebody has reached that skill level, you will just have that, right? Like, it'd be no different with chess. Why are there no heroes ready to play and affect the meta right out of the box? Why would a new player buy a box or case in 2023? That's a great point, Blake. That's a fantastic point, and that also kind of involves phase 2 right here, right? Is it brings up the valid question of what is happening, right? So I'm just gonna switch things up a little bit, give you a little bit of me. But it basically, sorry, I lost my spot when box sales in 2023 with the low power level. We'll get into I guess we can hit it now, but I kind of haven't been excited to open a box since Uprising. If I'm being honest, right? Yeah, I would say Uprising. Uprising had the dragons, had stuff like that, and Outsiders was cool. The codexes, the alt arts, those were really, really cool. Amazingly well done cards. There just wasn't enough of them. They were too rare. They were too rare to make it feel obtainable. I think Marvel Dragons, don't quote me on this. I'm not a massive box opener, but if I'm not mistaken, Marvel Dragons came in one every 2 box, right? So if you got a case, you were guaranteed two dragons, right? And you felt like you got something, right? And a whole nother thing is cold foil commons. I don't understand. Chat, you tell me, when's the last time you were excited when you opened a cold foil common? I'll tell you mine. Mine was a pair of Ironhide gauntlets from Monarch. Was the last time I legit opened a cold foil common or rare, whatever set we're going off of, and was like, this is cool, right? Cold foil Snapdragons. Grasp of Darkness, yep. Legend says that Nam quit this case because he had 4 cold foil commons and nothing else. The cold foil Sentry cards are cool. I will agree with that. I mean, that's awesome. If people are enjoying the cold foil Cogworks base equipment, that's not in the box, right? Oh, the Cogworks. Yeah, that is. I thought you meant the proto that you won at the pre-release. Okay. But it seems like, roughly, just guessing on chat basis, 75% or so, it's been a minute. 25%, some people like the Radiant set, Grasp of Darkness because it was playable for a little bit. Still is playable in Levia. Don't sleep on her. She's still a decent hero, right? But and then some of the Bright Light stuff. But the point is a lot of people have just been, kind of down on those. To me, they just kind of lost their specialness to them. Maybe I don't know. Yeah. Let me keep going up. So yeah, as far as boxes and stuff goes, I completely understand. But at the same time, they're trying to accomplish an end game goal of trying to power the game down. I think everybody in chat wants to see what that is. I just want people to stick around long enough to see it. That's my thing. That's all I want. So, Blake, I hope that somewhat answers your question. I think we're just in a correction phase, and it's painful. I think that's it. But I think that if they nipped the top, aka Voltaire and stuff like that, then like it's not as bad. Like maybe you can play Dash.io or you can play Max if Lexi isn't sitting there giving you 13.5 frostbites while also endless airing you to death, right? Like maybe that's cool. Maybe because Max is playable, suddenly you're all interested in bright lights, right? Like that's, that's my thought process. I think if Lexi wasn't dominating the meta for 9 months, I think the product would be a lot more interesting. You learn more from losing than winning. Amen to that. Don't agree with that necessarily. Playing non-meta into pure meta switch, sure. But you can easily have fun. Yep. You can combat spikiness by capping how many points a hero earns in a season. That's a good idea. But you lose out on LL catching any... Yeah, see, that's a good point. You caught yourself, right? Everybody knows that LSS is kind of a safety valve, right? For balance, right? And it's not what it's designed for, but it's a byproduct of what it is, right? And I think if you do that, you do kind of stop that, and they would have to be a lot heavier on bans if that was the case. I agree. Dromai is not another Lexi, not even close. I 100% agree. Especially if your deck is synergistic with expensive cards. Yep. That always be a best deck. Yeah, we talked about that point. Do we need block formats? I don't know enough about that subject to actually give a decent opinion on it, to be honest with you. I don't know what that would do. Block format. I mean, imagine if they did a block format and like Reinar was like never realized how sad that would be, right? Like you do a block format and you see heroes like Reinar and Bolton and Levia, right? And they rotate before they even get a chance. Like, I don't know. That seems like a feels bad to me. Take away from all this is he got, for Icelander, she's only like 500. Yep. This whole conversation around PT attendance issue and game meta feel very US only. Yeah, and that's what I mentioned. It seems like everywhere overseas. And another thing, I wanna specify that this doesn't look like the normal situation where it's like people need a break. Because we have, other than Nats, we haven't had like a competitive season for a few weeks. Even what? August? September, October. It's been 2 months since a competitive season. Like people have had a break. People just don't want the same thing. I do agree that the attendance problem is a US problem. I do agree. I do agree. I wonder if LSS is separating the data on, they would never post that data because it's not in their benefit to do so. If all your data says that you're growing, you're going to say all the data together is growing. You're not going to say you're going down here and going up here. It's just bad business, right? Player burnout is not measurable sentiment, though. That is correct. That is correct. And Vero, we are going to get into that. I promise you. The game just needs balance. Paper, rock, scissors, meta. Yep. It depends. It depends. I think FAB 2.0 was great. Some don't like it, but keeps things easier for some. People always complain about something. I don't know. I think it is people are just sick of Lexi meta. But the cause of the difference in attendance is because the meta is different in those regions. Yeah, I agree. I mean, that's kind of what we came to was they're not they haven't been in the same environment for the straight 9 months that we have, right? And so their attendance is just going through the roof. Or just everybody over there is not playing Lexi, because if Lexi's not coming to your event, it doesn't present a situation where you also need to play Lexi. Could be a little bit of that. Some decks are curbed a little bit on power because it would feel bad to lose them. Bolton Reinar, they print 0 for 3. Or cards that don't block. Yep. On stuff like that, I got to give the LSS devs the benefit of the doubt. Are there some cards, on an average basis, I think they do a very, very good job on balancing the game. I think certain cards get a little put, because like I mentioned earlier in the stream, anytime a card is kind of broken, I don't want to say broken the game, but heavily influenced the meta, it's a big card like Codex of Frailty. We're starting to see it with Tome. We saw a little bit for Warmongers, right? And so just, it's cards that are really pushed. And so if you took those out, I don't know. Three Codex were made, and one's never played. Inertia is sometimes played, and Codex is busted. Absolutely busted. My area has 2 PQs this weekend, both CC, and one is sold out at 32 slots, and the other 28 pre-registered. Awesome. Where is that location at? You're advocating for an LO point system that reflects the actual power difference of the decks. Could they be making the world's LO points so high to prevent back-to-back same hero wins? I don't think so. Right? Because if Worlds is this year, then 4 sets come out, and then you have next Worlds. I would hope that that hero is still not dominating. I would hope. Playtime TCG, nice to have you. The evening's going great. We're getting some good discussion in. Just getting caught up in chat before we start rolling. Card games equals someone upset about something. Yep. Players have power to LL any hero as a community. Never gonna happen. Yeah. Absolutely quack. I wouldn't be shocked to see LL turn out like EDH, where it goes from a niche game mode to a fan favorite. It could. I'm not sure, but this became the first 2 years of FAB format. Sadly, agree with Paul John's CC rotate. It felt like a long time, as it didn't for most decks. It's a great way to communicate. If you preach positivity, it doesn't get the same interaction if you post something negative. Yep. I love this game as well, Blake. And anything can be better. Nothing's perfect. I hope Round the Table is huge. I think it's been received very well. I think they did very good on that product on Round the Table. I'm just not a casual player. I don't have enough time with the kids and everything. Like I it's either play the game casually or competitive, and not both. So that just has to do with me and my obligations. But you know, to each his own. Yeah, I think it being hero bait is kind of big. We all know real negative is this darn Rune Blades with mixed damage. Well, real negative. Rune Blades are not the problem. Definitely not now, that's for sure. What if when a hero is like 950 and they start on banning? Yeah, nope. Do you think CC will become wild with the ice gone? I think it'll become very linear and aggressive, basically, when all the ice goes. What is a perfect goal for LL? Hitting 1,000 exactly, or destroying the L points and getting 1,500. I think if you overshoot it at all, like, I don't want to say that, but like, obviously 1,500 is a mistake, right? Um, like I said, I don't think the Lexi situation has anything to do with the amount of points. I think it's just the fact that we've been in the same meta for this long. For this long. All right, then Vera brought up we need to ban all old generics for whatever reason. Oh, I gotta hear this one. I gotta hear this one. I think being how long should it take before they achieve LL? I mean, that's a decision that they've handled mathematically, right? If what one hero, if they have like 16 as their set number, then they add anywhere between 9 and 11 per year, then you need to rotate what? Like you need to rotate that many per year, and you divide that by, I don't know. That's a tough question. I don't think there's an answer on like what something should be. We just don't need to play the same game for 9 months. Crown 100% should have been banned. I don't like how they handled Oldham. Yeah, I mean, I don't disagree with you. And that's another thing on the Lexi argument. There is no reason. There's definitely no reason. I know I'm 30 minutes behind Vero. I'm trying to get. So I'm trying to get caught up real quick. But I think that like the argument of like of banning Voltaire because I don't know. It's not a legendary, which is the reason they named Crown of Seas. They didn't want to take away the special moment of somebody opening it, which is fine. I get that. But Voltaire's just none of that. It's just none of that. So yeah, the Twitter post was not old. It was literally made 2 days ago, and I left the voting. We got 520, I think, votes on the poll, and that's what we came up with. But like I said earlier in the stream, you have to factor in some statistical things and stuff like that. But the main reason why I wanted to make that poll was to illuminate the kind of perception, if you will, of the game. Because saying we know this thing will LL, so we just don't know what to do. Yep. Hitting something like Endless Era would have made the Troma matchup way worse. Sure. Like, I don't care. Like, it could be anything, right? You just something needed to be done to change things up. They could have unbanned something that was stupid good, that was really good in Lexi, and at least something's different. I don't know, Hypothermia. I hate that card. And I think it's stupid good. But hell, if it changes things up, let's see it. Let's see it. The bad part about a hero sticking around is if they're miserable, it keeps the game miserable for longer. I don't think Briar was miserable. I mean, I'm kind of biased, but I mean, people complained about the high roll, but like a lot of decks can high roll. It's way easier to Rain Razor's 3 of a kind than it is to fucking play channel and hope you draw attacks. I'll tell you that much. We can check the math on that one. Not to mention Lexi became the best deck with a relatively low Living Legend point, and I think will be an outlier, as well as Lexi had an issue actually winning events. Yep. Is there a point where we are making too many heroes to play? That we did kind of get hit on that point where they've made up some number of how many active heroes they want into it, and they've allocated the LL points based on that, is what we're assuming. How can you be afraid of the game losing players? This? Half of the people that voted on this out of 517 said that they have witnessed a decrease in attendance at ProQuest and Armory. Like I gave the statistical analysis on why these numbers are not perfect and why there's so many flaws built into it. But at the end of the day, perception carries a lot of weight, right? That's just the reality of it. So that's I'm not showing my screen. But this poll right here is what I was referring to. Less attendance at the callings. Calling had 280 people. The second lowest calling attendance to that was like 500 compared to 280. So yeah, there's a lot of reasons to be afraid that the game's losing players. I don't know why they didn't hit anything for Lexi. Yep, we already talked about that. I don't think their goal is to have balanced heroes across the meta. People complain when there wasn't a best hero. I mean, something's always going to be the best. You just decrease the delta, which I say that just like it's so easy to do, right? But look, let's take Lexi and remove Codex of Frailty. Just Codex, right? Not even Volta. Do you absolutely... I'll tell you, the reason that they haven't hit Codex of Frailty is because if you take away Codex of Frailty, you have removed single-handedly every single reason to play the Assassin class ever. Period. If Codex of Frailty did not exist, Assassin would not exist. It's why it's still in the game. If that card at the bottom middle section said Assassin / nothing else, it would be perfect. It would be perfect. If it was an Assassin only card, we wouldn't have any problems. Azalea doesn't need it. Is it cool? Can she use it? Yes. Fuck. All right. Less attendance at events. Yep. Lexi was best deck. Everyone tired of Lexi while Bolton wins a nationals in Netherlands. But that's what I'm talking about. It's like I don't know how I don't know how to I don't know. I don't know if like the Lexi's there didn't know how to play against Bolton or what. But that should be a very favored matchup. Should be a very favored matchup. When Odom left, Lexi was already the best deck, though. I agree, 100%. PQ attendance seems solid so far in Texas. I mean, that's awesome. That is awesome. And Lexi hasn't won a calling yet, still despite being the best deck. Well, there's only been 2, right? There's been just Taipei and Dallas, right? But half of the top 8, she makes up almost half of it. There's like 3 or 4 Lexis in the top 8. So it's not about taking the event down. It's about conversion rates, right? And if you want to be more precise, the data point that you should actually use on whether a hero is balanced based off of winning is conversion into top 32, right? That should be that is the best metric, I believe. It just shows who is doing well, because at a calling, the difference between top 32 and top 8 is one win, right? And maybe you got your bad matchup, whatever the case may be, there's no telling. Oh yeah, Yuki did win a calling, by the way, in Vegas with Lexi. Thank you, chat. Money is also a huge problem for people right now. Absolutely, the economy is tightening. That's another fantastic point. All right, I'm almost caught up on chat, y'all. Literally just a couple more, and I think we got there. Thanks, Blake, for stopping by. I really do appreciate it. Kevin. Briar was the worst. What? All right. Dang, I thought I was caught up. You guys are killing it in the chat right now. Okay, so just so I can start interacting with chat in a lot easier. This seems like a good one. Hang on, I don't want to ask them to like retype this. One of my biggest issues currently is theme. If you're a semi-competitive person, what happens is you either feel forced to play a deck. Yep. Feel pushed into Lexi or Azuri as an example, okay? But then when I recommend new guys take this or that, you can then shift to X. It's not working because they may like a theme, for example. A drama player may not want to shift to Phi. Yep, it's a great point. Dang, they are killing their chat. Half the chat, just a couple more. If I missed your question, repost it. All right, I'm at the bottom of chat, and if I have not answered your question, please, I'm sorry, just repost it. Just repost it. I'm at the bottom of chat. I skipped. I don't know how much, y'all. There was so much. I did not plan for this. It's good though. We're hitting the good stuff. We're hitting the good stuff. I joined the stream 30 minutes ago. Nathan just read a message I saw 30 minutes ago. My bad, Aaron. My bad. Okay. All right. We're back. Okay. I'm back with the chat. God, that was a doozy. Okay. Bolton's pretty okay now. I've had a lot of success with him, but awful matchup still. Yep, I agree. Sorry about the delay. I was getting caught up in chat. It was so much. What do you think of the Yu-Gi-Oh approach of limited and restricted cards allowing one copy? That's something that they can do if they want. The one thing that I will say is anytime you limit something to one, you're asking for more variance within games, right? Kind of look at the Tumble Tide situation, right? Turn one Tumble Tide me, whatever. Well, if you limit things to one, you're increasing the variance because a lot of the times the matchup can come to whoever drew the one of one first, right? That's kind of like what can happen. So they can use it as a balancing mechanism, but I would say it's like a last. It's kind of like a last ditch effort. Uh, I'm not behind again. I'm behind like 4 chats. Jeez. There have been over 3 million games played, but not necessarily to completion on Talishar. Yep. Does LSS need a heavier hand on bans? It depends. I like the way that they do it. Like I said, this is the only time I think with Voltaire, the only time I've ever disagreed with the way that LSS has done bans. And like I said, it was just the fact that I wanted them to shake things up, right? That was the main thing. That was the number one thing, was I just wanted them to shake things up, make something fresh, get something else going. So I kind of like the way they do bans, how they're very restrictive with it. However, they got to act a little quicker, I think. I don't think it's okay for a hero to have their time in the sun like Lexi did. Like I would say Lexi all the way till like national season was probably fine. But like after Nat season, probably really needed to hit. Will you play Katsu for me at a calling, Nathan, please? That is my question. Unfortunately, that is not on my short list of decks to play for Worlds. So that it just is be what it is. Katsu's a little inconsistent for my taste. I know as I sit with a Briar card behind me. I'm trying to be a more consistent player and play with decks that operate on a more consistent axis. And Katsu just is not that, because he requires certain things at certain times. And I'm trying to move away from that. How do you think Lexi would have been if they did hit Voltaire? I think the only way to play Lexi, you guys are killing it. Inconsistent. My bad. I think the only way that you could play Lexi is like Death Dealer Ice Lexi, probably, which is annoying as crap. But there are clear-cut counters to how to beat that deck, right? You just fatigue it. It has a 0% win rate into Bravo, and you just fatigue it, right? Like, that's okay. It's a good deck. It's even an annoying deck, but like, it has a flaw and it can be exploited, right? That's how it kind of should be. Incidentally, just joined FAB after selling all my Magic cards, hearing that FAB is not in a good state. Now, we're not saying that FAB is in a bad state. What I'm trying to purvey is there is a perception that basically things are not as good as they used to be. I don't think some of it has validity behind it, but some of it, I think a lot of it is an overreaction, to be honest. Majority of FAB games are played on Talishar. That's a fact. I could agree with that. It's going to be the case with any online client. You were right about the variance. I guess it works in Yu-Gi-Oh! Because you draw your entire... Yep, that's correct. Yep, you draw your entire deck all the time. And yeah. Is the fact that so many people point to so many different heroes as being awful to play against a good thing? I think the only time that people have truly complained about heroes like big time is when there's like look at Illusionist, for example, Spectra, Dragons, Board State, right? Some heroes just naturally do not have the toolkit within their cards to handle that situation, no matter what they do. They just can't handle it. Starvo, it was just unbalanced, right? And then Chain and Lexi are kind of in the same boat where they just do something inherently too powerful. Is kind of the idea. That's the real Briar on the wall, by the way. We don't do no fake stuff here. All right, let me get caught up in chat. Once again, you guys are killing it today. I think we can go for some more variants. Fab is the most consistent game by far. I think that's what makes it attractive, though, to be honest. When Isolander LLs, which hero has the most disruption and why is it Bravo? I mean, it'd be Bravo and Azalea for sure. I think it'd be which one do you want to play and who do you want to counter kind of situation. Keep on a barrel or get behind. Love it, guys. Love it. Do you think people who complain too much about Fab and toxic heroes actually just need to get good? That's a great question. I do really think the game rewards getting reps in on different heroes. I agree with that to some extent. But at the same time, the game is a competitive game kind of from a basis level. But I don't know. I think Lexi just doesn't have a glaring weakness. Maybe it wouldn't be as bad if Dromai wasn't there to actually counter, like hard counter, all the stuff that she is bad into. Maybe that has a lot to do with it. Maybe it's just the dichotomy between Dromai and Lexi and how Dromai kind of supplements Lexi's matchups indirectly. Because when Dromai leaves, like, then you could just play Assassin and like figure out the other matchups, right? That's a valid point. Do you think more body pilling? Oh God! By faster, do you more scheduled BNRs or hot fix bans? I mean, well timed. Like realizing that the arsenal is, or not the arsenal, realizing that the meta is stale, basically, and adjusting accordingly, right? I mean, it was kind of sad to see that, like the whole point of the Bright Lights pitch was like, Mechanologist is getting 300 new cards. That's unprecedented, and it's, give it a chance, and it's done nothing, right? On the Mechanologist side. Now, the best card in Bright Lights was not Mechanologist, it was the Tome, right? Fab in current day is in a good state. Games are still fun. I mean, it's not I'm not saying that it's bad. I would never I'm just worried, once again, kind of going back to this situation. I'm worried about losing players in the middle phase. Right? That's just what I'm worried about. That's my main kind of point. I'm Vera. Who's behind the chat? That should be Kyle, right? It's not Vera. There's no way. Just run both accounts. And he's behind. If I wanted to play variant, if I wanted variants, I'd play Magic. I 100% agree. How's Fi looking now? Well, we're not going to talk about meta for sure. I really like the reduction in variance when compared to Magic, to be honest. Yep. Does the real bar need to be present in L format or not? I mean, I don't know. I don't think with hypothermia around, that's a dangerous deck to play, to be honest with you. If you're about to give my wife my debit card if you don't get me on stream. Oh God. We gotta keep Barrel on the ropes a little bit longer, chat. We gotta keep him on the ropes a little bit longer. See, Vero getting ignored is the best part of the stream, not gonna lie, that's a fact. Illusionist is a mistake. I understand the take, and it's very It's a very big. I think they're in the right direction, right? Original Prism, Dromine, and this Prism, they are getting in the right direction, 100%, 100%. Best deck always makes sense. Yep. Emboldened Blade, no, nope, 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 nope. Oh, you're in chat with Colin. You're just telling him what to type. There's no way this is Vera. No shot. Do you think the issue of no mech heroes making impact a function of Bright Light's release window compared to Worlds? No, I think that Lexi, the best deck, just directly counters everything in that set. Simple as that. Tome of Imperial Flame was created for Emperor and Blitz. Droma stole it. I mean, I'd buy it. Barrow's still ignored. Yep, we're gonna keep him on the ropes a little bit longer. People want to stick with what they know rather than test new heroes. Well, when the hero's busted and they're getting free wins by drawing a couple cards, then I mean, what deck draws a bunch of cards, has go again on a stick, and blocks 3 on almost every card? Am I missing something? It's literally me. Okay. All right. I'm caught back up on chat. And then, so we'll go ahead and bring Vero on. So that way, if I lose track of chat again, I can just blame it on him. That seems like a good idea. Okay. All right. Remember, Vero, we got to keep it cordial. We got to keep it cordial. First of all, before I bring him in, I'll keep him on the ropes just a little bit longer. The reason I wanted to bring Vero on is he kind of has, I wouldn't call him hot takes, but Vero hangs out in the Discord a lot, and so we have a lot of conversations. And, you know, we kind of like bounce ideas off of each other, right? I'll say like, this is going good for the game. He'll say, no, it's not. And like, he approaches things very logically. Sometimes he puts a funny spin on it and takes it a little too far, but like for the most part, a lot of his logic is pretty based, right? And so, yeah, Vero does have opinions, yes. But for the most part, like, a lot of the stuff is good. I don't agree with everything he says, but we'll have a discussion. Let me bring him in. Lit takes. All right. Let me do something that I'll regret forever. Okay, go here, move to great start. Great start.
You have your soundboard on? What kind of streamer are you?
Okay. Unreal. Okay.
Fun for soundboards?
So if you're not in the Discord, join. We have a good soundboard.
Please don't join.
All right. So let me turn you up a tad. Say something for me.
Something.
Say something again.
Something again, but louder.
Yeah. Okay. There we go. I think you got chat. Double check me on the volume level. Okay. So Vero, you want to go ahead? You want to go ahead and introduce yourself?
I mean, not really. What do people really need to know about me? Particularly, probably nothing much, but I'm 30. I'm old. I've been playing card games for way too long. Strategy games for even longer. I got 2 kids. They suck.
Respect.
Yeah. You know?
All right. So, all right. What do you want to talk about first? I'm gonna kind of play devil's
Where do I
advocate here.
begin? I wish I could have been here for everything. I mean, where do we even start from all the things we've talked about?
You pick, and then I'll just play devil's advocate.
Okay, let's grab my favorite person in Flesh and Blood Twitter, and that is Brian Gottlieb. Let's go to his last tweet. I like that tweet a lot.
Okay.
Let's pull it up on stream.
Yeah, yeah.
Yeah, and I'm a few seconds behind. You're about 30 minutes behind, but we'll both catch up.
I got it on the stream.
Yeah, I'm waiting for it to come up. I want to be where.
You're talking about the six things that are.
Yeah. Yeah, of course, naturally.
Am I delayed that much?
No, I'm messing around. I'm messing around.
Okay.
Well, yeah. So like, I see this tweet today, and this reminds me of one thing, and is that this is a very, I guess, hot opinion I have, and I just don't know how people don't see this. I totally never think ever the devs should communicate with the community as much as Brian and others do, and I don't mean this in any slight against them. There's a reason why companies, when they get big, they have PR managers. I work, for anybody who cares to know, I work for a lot of government projects. And if we had our engineers talk to the customers, we'd lose every goddamn contract. There's a reason you hire a PR manager. And some of his tweets just come off as very snarky and things like that. That's fine. He can do what he wants. I'm not going to tell him what to do. I'm not saying that at all. But so when you interact with the community this much as somebody who's, you're very close to your game, you obviously love your game, you're a developer of it, sometimes your snarkiness or your pride might get in the way, and you make some tweets like this, and I want to go through some of these points, because I don't want to speak for him, but he presents this in a way as if some of these points are like, not conducive to each other, or they're completely far from each other. I don't think they are. Like, heroes rotate too slowly. That can be true. Heroes do rotate too slowly. We've had, as we've talked about, 6-9 months of Lexi, things like that. Right. Because heroes rotate very slowly because they are very dominant. And now they can be, and as we talk about, they can be very prevalent in your local meta. And your local meta ranges from armories all the way up to, I'd say, PQs and RTNs. Those are realistically who you play with. I know some people travel here and there, and it's whatever. So if Lexi is this dominant of a deck, let's just say, and it's there for 9 months plus, it's going to feel like an eternity. And yes, we can also argue, but maybe she could have LL'd faster. She doesn't win all these callings. The reality is, if I had to put a number on it, 80, maybe 85% of the Flesh and Blood community probably has not played a calling, or will not play a calling, at least this year. Okay. And I don't think that's a hot take at all. I think that's like, you just look at the numbers. A lot of people go to the callings, or most likely the same people. The vast majority of people are going to play somewhere from 0.1 to maybe 100 miles from their house. And that's like a stretch. That's where most people who play this game, whatever country, and that's where they're going to play.
I mean, that makes sense just based off the numbers, right? Because you had 280 people at the calling, and there's definitely more than like 2,000 people that play the game in the U.S.
The vast majority who play it are just going to be close by. So when you're playing against these heroes, and all they do is win your armories, and all they do is win your PQs and RTNs, blah, 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 all this stuff, it's going to feel like an eternity. The heroes do rotate too slowly when they are way too strong. Now, inversely, saying heroes rotate too quickly, that's not like at odds with that. Heroes do rotate too quickly when it's like, hey, for example, Lexi and potentially Dromai now, we have this hero, it's been around for a while, and we print this very lukewarm set, and let's just say Dusk Till Dawn or Bright Lights, and then we just inject 1 or 2 random cards into it, like Tome or Codex or whatever it may be, and it takes the hero who is in the middle of the pack with everybody else and just catapults them so much above. So what usually happens is, and it's not always by design, it's sometimes by bad luck, but Codex comes in and absolutely catapults Lexi at just about the same time that Oldhim was leaving, more or less. I know there's some overlap there. Okay. So how it appears to the average person is Oldhim, this bugaboo of the format forever, just leaves. And everybody's like, finally, it's my time for insert XYZ deck to come. Nope. And then just some other hero just catapults straight up, runs through the format for 6 to 9 months, is the defining deck of what you can and can't play against. And then it's like, oh, finally, Lexi's leaving. It's a reprieve. And we printed Tome again. And who knows what's going to happen with Dromai. Off the preliminary results, it won a calling, yes, and it's taken about 200 to 300 LL points, and we'll see what next week brings. And I don't know how defining the deck's going to be, and I won't speak to the future. But I don't think these points are at odds necessarily. For a very long time, we've had heroes who've just dirtled around. Dash is probably the most organic hero I can think of, who's like gained points relatively organically through all of the seasons, all of the PQs, RTNs, callings. I mean, you could probably say Merrick has a bunch of those points, and Sutherland, but there's others. Yep. And I think that's the most organic hero. And some of these heroes have been around forever. And that is what it is, and we can argue that till we're blue in the face for a lot of reasons. So I don't think these points are at odds. And I don't know how you feel about that, but I kind of just want to go to 3 and 4 because these are what really gets me going. And you asked about this
I
before,
mean,
but I mean,
yeah.
yeah,
So my biggest thing about this tweak is it kind of doesn't accomplish anything. It's just a, I don't know, like a defensive jab kind of is what it feels like.
right. Which is once again why I think they should have a PR team who makes tweets like this. And once again, I'm not saying Brian can or cannot do whatever he wants. He's more than welcome to do whatever he wants. I have no personal gripes or anything with him. But
Right.
if anybody who's come from Magic or other games, like we saw the Rosewater, all those things and how much that guy like, and he's said some not great stuff, and he's also said some great stuff. But he, kind of owns that as his role. But there's a reason you kind of like have a PR team for a lot of things. And usually when you don't, you see it in a lot of games. I've been in a lot of grassroots games all the way up to very successful games like that. I've been very entrenched in communities. And it's just not good that way.
So,
Like I said, you hold the game very close to your heart because you design it. I get it. And there's things you might see in the future because of from your playtesting groups, or things you might not see, or just things you feel might have a certain way. And they don't come across properly, even if you mean them with well intentions to the average player. If somebody is semi like on the fence right now and is like, I'm not really happy with the games going, blah blah blah, and you see a tweet like this, all you think is, wow, so I'm the asshole. Like that's how you just look at it. You're like,
mhm.
oh, I'm wrong for having, being critical of the game. It just doesn't come across right to the average person. If anybody, as you can tell, I have very thick skin. I don't care at all, but I'm
Sure,
always
sure.
from my job and things I do in life and having kids and a wife and all these things. Like it's me putting myself. I've learned in my old age of wisdom to put myself in other people's shoes and like what the average player is going to think and what the average player is going to feel. And if you are somebody who's right now in between on the game, you've been getting beat up, all you do is
Hmm.
play brute. You just, you're out in the West Coast. Everything's like $72 a gallon for gas, and then you're playing brute, and then you can't win a game because like they just keep printing all these things. I can understand, why you would be very upset, for things like that. But I personally want to get on to points 3 and 4 unless
Uh,
you have anything else about 1 and 2, because 1 and 2 are pretty like, lukewarm. But I think 3 and 4 are like huge.
no, I mean I can't think of anything worse than $72 a gallon and playing brute. So yeah, let's move on to 3 and 4.
Yeah, no, for sure. One second.
You good?
Yeah, no, I'm good. Yeah. So for the too much power creep part, um, I think there is like too much power creep. It's one of those things where it's not so much power creep as in a whole. Like, so going back to my last point with WTR to Crucible, like generic bans,
Mm-hmm.
it's that when you print, like just looking at, if I asked you like, oh, what are these chess pieces that like the top 3 classes play, you'd rattle them off pretty easily. And then if I say, oh, like what about that new assassin piece or the new, insert off tier, you're just like, oh, what is that called? Like you wouldn't even be able to rename the piece. It's Redback Shroud, right? But you're just like, Tunic is just so much better than all these cards by and large, like 99% of the time.
Mm-hmm.
And I think so people see that and like, oh, so there is no power creep. Like they're just printing bad cards, like not enough powerful cards. When we say there's too much power creep, it's more so too much power creep in very specific cards for very narrow heroes, and generally they're heroes who are already at the top or near the top. So when you're Bolton or Rhinar or whoever, and you just kind of been in the middle of the pack forever, and you see cards like Tome get printed or Codex get printed or Warmonger get printed or whatever it is, that is a huge power creep for those heroes and is directly negative to whatever your hero's like thing is. Like Azalea, who's been having some good success, has not really been that deck. She hasn't, she hasn't been that bitch. And then she gets bullseyes and she's like, oh, she's kind of doing some things. And they take that away. And it's like, okay, whatever. That was a side nerf. And then she's starting to get strong again. And then they just like print Warmongers, which is like, granted, I think we've all learned, well, I can't say all, but most people have learned it doesn't just jam into every deck like everybody thought it did. But a lot of decks can still play it for like little to no deck building costs, and it hoses a bunch of heroes like Runeblade and Ragers. And people like Levi and Justin, all the other good Azaleas, have found ways to still mitigate getting blown out by it, but it is still a reality that you'll just get blown out by it. And then you say, oh, well, so you're saying all these cards are too strong, but I thought cards were not powerful enough, and they're not. You look at Prism, you look at all the new Levia cards, you look at most of the mech cards, and that's a little bit TBD. We'll find out for sure. You look at a lot of the assassin cards, like all these new heroes, Bolton, whatever. All the cards you've printed are not powerful enough, and they're not powerful enough for 2 reasons. One, you've taken a weak hero and given them like milquetoast cards compared to everything that exists,
Mm-hmm.
and then you give other heroes even better cards. So you're like, hey, I was a mid-tier hero. The heroes ahead of me got really, really strong cards, whether it was on purpose or not. Like, inadvertently, you might have not realized the card was really good together. And then, and then, like, how do you feel? You're like, oh yeah, like you guys print no powerful cards for me. All the cards I'm Bolton. I got 0 for 3s that I got to fatigue myself just to play. And you say, yeah, there's not enough powerful cards in the set. And then you say, oh, there's too much powerful. Like, I don't think those things are at odds because they're not just like as a whole. Nobody's saying all the cards you're printing are too powerful or all the cards you're printing are too weak. It's just that the vast majority of them are too weak. And to go back to the point you brought out in chat before, I think a lot of these things stem back to the original year or two of FAB, specifically WTR to Crucible. The generics are just too strong. I know, like, I'm not the first person to bring up this point. I think it was
Charles Dunn,
was it
right?
Charles Dunn? Yeah,
Yeah,
I was
yeah,
like, I'm
yeah.
pretty sure it was
Yep.
Charles Dunn who brought this up. And
Sink below,
we
stuff like that.
Yeah, because I mean, and it's a perfect example, right? To look at it like Sink Below and Fae Foreseen. Really, really strong, meta-defining cards. Every card that like has value in this game, and I mean both in the game and even monetarily for that point, they all revolve around like how good is this card with or against Tunic? How good is this card with or against CNC? How good is this card with or without D-reacts? A lot of cards, if you really boil them down, like when you start thinking of reasons like, oh, why don't you play this card? Or 2 for 6s. Why would I play this 2 for 6 when CNC exists? Why would I play this niche card when E-Strike exists? There's so many cards that just get absolutely trumped by some of these generic staples. And I'm not saying games shouldn't have staples, like they shouldn't. But I've played a lot of games, and usually the generic cards are cards that are quote unquote generic. They're generically good, or they fit generic niche roles or whatever. And usually, as a game builds out and builds up on these things, they become like, things of the past. Like using Hearthstone as an example, some of the best decks in Hearthstone usually just run like generic legendaries, generic this, generic that. Like 5 cost this was like, that was like I think it was Azure Drake was like one of the big ones. It was like a 5 cost 4/4 that drew a card. It was like the baseline. Like that was like, was the card better or worse than this? And then as the game evolved and they fleshed it out, it kind of became like a thing of the past. It was like, oh, it was niche in some decks. It worked with some strategies, blah blah blah. CNC is never going to be like that. For an example, it is a very good card. It is format defining. It's very low deck costs, in my opinion, to put it into our deck construction costs. And if you've now said you're going to make cards weaker because you agree that that was probably too strong of an era, granted, I think it's more so the middle sets, Monarch onwards, that they reference, like TOA, stuff like that. But if you say that you're going to build cards that are less good, essentially, for lack of a better word, how do you, those two things are at odds, right? You're like, hey, this is the 2 for 6 popper that you play. This is the 0 for 5. This is the 0 for 4. You look at Katsu, it's like, oh, he gets Flick Flack. That's really cool. It's like Sink Below, but better. And it has a niche thing with his like hero, right? With combos. The next cards get the block for more. That's really cool. It's a really good take on how you would essentially not invalidate, but be like, oh, you don't have to play Sink Below. But like no other hero has that, right? You have like maybe Reckless Swing, which is like more niche because it does damage. There's other reasons why you play that. It's like, how do you compare all these new cards that you're printing? Like, I think the closest card we've got, right, in almost a year and a half or 2 years that could even compare to CNC, what was it? Was it Amnesia? Because that one's a 2 for 6 that blocks for 3, right? If I'm not mistaken.
Yep, that's correct.
So it's like, okay, cool. Like, that was like a start. But when you really boil it down and look at it, how useful, other than against like Katsu, and I think the new Prisms interactions work this way, don't quote me.
Right.
Does like your hero forgetting the name of the cards actually matter?
Right.
It's so niche and so like not really relevant to how useful CNC is almost always.
I mean, that makes sense. But what part of it is right? Because they have to design the game in a constructed and a limited sphere, right? So like you could compare like the block cards to Sink Below, right? There's no reason you would ever play block over Sink Below,
right?
Unless
and to be fair, it is a limited set that you have to balance around overpower and things like that. Like I'm not completely disconnected from the fact that there is a limited and a CC component, especially with them pushing out limited things, and we'll get to that to the next point. Like pushing out more limited sets, there will be a lot of chaff cards. Like I get that, I fully get that. But we'll continue.
No, I was just gonna say, like, you basically answered it. I was just making sure that your point included the fact that they do have to design around both, but at the same time, like a lot of those cards, like Sink Below, Fate Foreseen, are cards that are utilized to combat certain strategies, like Bravo, Azalea, and stuff like that. Or
Yes.
Dash uses them to combat those, right?
100%. Yep.
So if you take away those tools, are you saying like we can keep the cards, but we just need something that's lower on rate? Are you saying like Sync Below as a 0 for 3 is fine? Or are you saying that it's just too above rate? Like what exactly is the qualm with, we'll just use the example straight from the get-go of the D reacts, the 0 for 4 D reacts.
Right. So I will say I think Favor Scene is probably fine, and I think you can keep that one. But Sync Below is a very good card because it's the 0 for 4 D react. It's very like quote unquote above rate, on rate, however you want to classify that as, and it syncs the card. It's hand fixing. It does a lot.
Yep.
And then to go back to CNC, I've already explained why that's good. Tunic, I mean, I don't even know if we have to have that conversation. I think we all agree Tunic is played in probably way too many decks for a generic.
Yeah.
Crown is kind of the same thing. Granted, fortunately, Crown has gone down in price, similar to Tunic. And I don't think Crown of Providence, that is as big of a problem. But I think it revolves around that card was so good and so relevant, specifically because of CNC. Yes, it still has hand filtering and arsenal filtering, and it is a 2-block generically.
Right.
I get that. But it also had so much value because of CNC. It like invalidated that card to a degree. It's like, oh, I can take 4 damage this turn, have a 5-card hand. Phew, thanks. I didn't even want this card, right? Like, that was a big reason why Crown was $300 for a very long time. There were other reasons. I'm not saying it's the only one. But to go on to that point, it's kind of like what I said with Katsu. It's like, oh, this class, if we recognize that this class is weak, or we recognize this class is too strong in some areas, like, you can get a 0 for 4 D react, but it either comes at a cost or it comes with a bonus, depending on your hero. Like Katsu, very weak generally as a defender. Not a great defending hero. And I know Turtle Katsu is a thing that I know somebody's going to be yelling in chat, but like a 0 for 4, and then your next card blocks for +2. Okay, really cool. Like, that's really cool.
Mm-hmm.
Like, that's great. Now, when you're building out all these new heroes, whether it be like brutes or, I don't know, illusionists, mechs, whatever it is, there could be like, oh, you get a 0 for 5 react or a 0 for 4 react, but you have to sacrifice an item or take a steam counter off an item, or it's a 0 for 3, but if you pay a steam counter, you do this. Things that make you want to play this D react in your hero, things that make you want to play more cards that are in your hero pool and less generics, I think are good for the game. But as long as like Sync Below exists, like why would you ever play a card that says this thing blocks for 0 for 3, but it might block for more if you like, I don't know, sack an item or give a steam counter, some arbitrary thing that's like tied to your class, whatever it is, right? You would just never do that. Like, so it's like, it's a waste of design space probably to even talk about these things like in a design test team. If I had to pretend I was LSS, like why even waste our time with that if people are just going to play Sync Below? And we see that for some cards, right? Like they try to print really cool cards, and you hear like everybody on Twitter is just like, I'll just play insert card here,
right?
And it's like they're not wrong most of the
time. This card
like,
at home,
like, yeah, exactly. Like why wouldn't you do that? And a lot of these cards are just like, I mean, Tunic is a huge one. Like I think Redback Shroud is an amazing design card, really cool, so it busted in draft. But I also think Outsider is one of the best draft formats. But anyway, like Assassin Shroud, I think it's a really cool. It's thematic. You block with your armor as an assassin. It's battle worn. You know, it's about to be destroyed. Oh, you got one last trick in your bag. Haha! And like you do the thing. Thematic, cool card, great card. But other than Blitz, why would you ever play that card over Tunic? You just wouldn't.
Right.
You just like almost never would. Unless you're planning, unless CC becomes a format that ends in less than 3 turns, which I don't foresee it anytime soon. Yeah, like that's like, I don't think these too much power creep versus not enough powerful cards are really at odds. I think certain things, whether it be heroes, archetypes, cards as a whole, are getting too much power creep, and then all the other heroes are getting not enough powerful cards. You're just like, why does this person, like if you're Bolton, you got all of DTD, you got all this, or DTD, all this stuff, Dust Till Dawn, you got all these cards, you got like, what was it, like I think we had like 120 cards or something,
right?
Maybe if you're counting all the variations of colors, whatever. And then you just like look over to like one other class who's not even like supposed to be in the set, or is an expansion class, or just like a throwaway card like Warmongers, or like Codex of Frailty from, granted, you know, Assassin Ranger was pushed, or, you know, Tome from Jeromai, even Dust from Jeromai. It's just like, I got nothing. My cards still have the innate problem that Bolton does, and all these other people just get better. They either get better by proxy because of the printing of certain cards, pushes down their bad matchups, whatever it is, or the matchups get better because they get to play this card. I don't think these things are at odd, and I understand what he was trying to say, you know, trying to be snarky, like, oh, nobody can decide on what they want. And he's not wrong. Like,
right.
Even me, like, right, there are some things that I say, and then like 2 months later I might change my mind, or I might say something that seems at odds with it, and I totally agree.
Yep.
But both of these things are like, and somebody said it great in this thread as well, and I don't remember exactly who it was or whatever, but all of these points individually can also be relevant to who's saying them, right? Like somebody who plays like us, right? Plays a lot, travels a lot, is on Talishar, we might recognize that heroes rotate too slowly, and that might be our prevailing opinion. But somebody who plays the game slightly more casual and maybe wants to get into the game, or whatever it is, they might think, yo, heroes rotate too quickly. I'm a dad, I got 2 kids,
Yep.
I got a job, a mortgage, all this stuff. I buy into this deck, and then 6 months later it's gone. It's gone. Like, I can see how you could have that opinion. I can see how 30% of the player base has that opinion, and 40% has the one we have, and 20% are just like, we don't care.
Right.
So yeah, I didn't like that one. And then 5 and 6 we can talk about whenever if you want to make any final points.
Yeah.
So I got distracted before somebody came down here. That's why I said pause, like one of my family members.
No, you're good. You're good. So to get the whole point across, you're advocating that those cards should be removed from the game, right? Sink below, stuff like that.
Like I said, it doesn't have to be every single card on naming for sure. I think there's room to be tested, but I think like Tunic is a big one. CNC is a big one. Sink below might be there. It might be one of those cards that needs to go. Tome of Findel is a very contentious card. I know it seems silly because like there's really been no like great decks that have played Tome of Findel. But it's a very interesting card because whenever you hear, I think we saw this with like the Eloquence token and some of these other things. Whenever we get heroes who can like, oh, I can abuse action points.
Right.
Whether it's like dash at instant speed with the boost thing. The first card that always comes to a lot of people's minds is like, oh, Tome of Findel.
Right.
I'm just gonna jam it in every deck, draw 3 cards, like maybe gain health, whatever it is. And I think it doesn't seem like much of a problem, but it lends to that fact that when really cool design space opens, everybody kind of looks backwards instead of current or forwards. And you can argue that's not like a terrible thing, but to me, what that reminds me of is Magic. I know you haven't played much, but like with the Modern and Legacy formats, it's like new Standard card comes out, and like everybody's excited about cards, and there's like 5 cards in a Standard set that nobody gives a shit about, except for like the 7 people who play Vintage, and then like the 1,000 people who play like Legacy. They're like, oh my god, this card is so cool with this card from like 1997, and everybody goes crazy, and they buy it out in TCG, and that all happens. And I don't necessarily think that's a bad thing, but I think it's not a great thing for a game that's only been around like 3 years. Like, I think when you see cool cards, you should be kind of thinking current and new. Like, oh, something from like a set or 2 ago, not something from 2 years ago, because, and this could be hyperbole on my part, but if this is where we are in year 3, is year 4, 5, and 6 going to get better? If you especially if you're going towards the down I don't want to say power creep versus nerfing, but if you're watering down the power to a degree and trying to make it more thematic, if everybody's constantly looking back to how these cards work with like the linchpins of the format, I think it takes away specifically from Flesh and Blood because it's so hero oriented, it's so character oriented, archetype oriented, whatever you want to call it. I don't think it's fun to be like, oh, my new Katsu cards came out. Can't wait to go back and like find 9 cards from like WTR or something that might work with it because like, CNC is still good. I could bring CNC in. Like, let's just say they print some like Katsu card that's like, you can get free resources if you do this. Everybody's gonna be like, oh my god, free resources. We can play CNC in our deck at no cost. Like things like that. I'm just making up random examples. It's why I think some of these cards just need to be neutered. Like, not the class card. Like, keep all the Bravo cards. Keep all the Katsu cards. The class cards should be iconic to the class. It's the generics that I think are just too strong.
Okay, so do you think that as I showed earlier, kind of the phase 3 thing, the meme, do you think the execution of what they are trying to accomplish will kind of inadvertently handle what you just mentioned, with like not a whole lot of the cards being powerful in the set, right? Like let's just imagine a world where Dromai didn't exist, Lexi didn't exist. Let's just take out like the top 5 decks, right?
Right.
And then you're opening a box of Bright Lights. Is it then more exciting because there's a chance it could be relative, or are you saying that it's solely because of those heroes and plus the generics that it kind of robs it of its uniqueness?
I think in the perfect world where like you said, Dromai goes, Lexi goes, Icelander goes, Azalea goes, some of these heroes go, Bravo maybe even, and you get to this like, let's just say Dynasty onwards, where that's like the most relevant heroes. I think if you continue in the downtrend of power relatively, I don't know. Like, I'd love to see that phase 3, and I hope people stay along for it, but I do not fault anybody who's living this quote-unquote hell of phase 2, where if you want to leave the game or go play something else or take a break, I don't blame you. Like, I think it was Blake said, there's really no reason for you to stick around and play this game. There's, like, no incentives, and we talked about this before, and I won't go on too much of a tangent. I'll get back to your original question, but, like, with armories, like, what's the point of showing up to an armory? The one thing to show up to an armory, which I personally hate right now, is the XP system. It rewards grinders, it rewards people who show up a lot, play at multiple shops, try super hard, grind out XP, like kind of make an uninviting like unwelcoming atmosphere, because if you're constantly showing up, like we have this problem in my area, people literally only want to play Blitz and only want to play meta heroes.
Because you get more reps
3 or 4
in.
games in, get more reps, get more XP. I know people who play 5, 6, 7 times a week. I think it's personally ridiculous that you can get rewarded for that in 90-day XP, at least in bigger events. Maybe for nationals you can reward it, but whatever. But I won't go too big of a tangent there. But like armory promos as well. I think the last playable good armory promo we had, and we talked about this as well the other day, was like Tar Pit Trap maybe.
Yeah.
Like, it's been quite a while. I think if you print really good cards, it don't be the best cards in the format, but just print a really good playable, something in a cool alternate art, whatever it is, like a really good playable card for either a class or generic, whatever it might be. I think more people would show up for that. Like, I legitimately haven't played an armory in over like almost 3 months now. I do not care about a Jack-o'-lantern. I do not care about like war machines and stuff like that. And another big thing with a lot of these cards, they print sometimes they do print somewhat playable cards, but then they print them in all like the red, blue, yellow, and like you just want your reds, and then you never show up again, like whatever.
Yeah.
I think like Magic has done F&M for a while, and it was like you showed up once a week, that was your thing. They had like really cool they had like foil, Texas cryptic commands. They had so many cool cards, and Magic strayed away from that after a while too. And I'm not saying they're perfect by any means, but there were really cool cards. And I think in the beginning of FAB, I didn't play much back then. It was a mixture of COVID and stuff, but there was like, I see people like, oh, that was an armory card, and it's like $70, which is really cool cards. And you look at it, and it's not just that they're old as to why they're worth a lot. They're really good, generic cards. So I think that's one thing to get people into armories. But to go back to the original point of like,
well, real quick before you move on, I want to talk about the armory. You mentioned the promos, which is something I intended to mention on the stream that I didn't get the chance. I'm going to show it on the screen right now. What Vero was referencing was the allocation of the armory promos. Like Break of Dawn, that's never seen play. Hungering Demigod, never seen play. Angelic Wrath, Phantom Banshee, somewhat seen play. Herald after Prism, Living Legend, right? And then we saw, what was it? Tar Pit Trap was printed in December of 2022. Was like the last and that one was only relevant the past couple months. The real last where they were all playable were the lace sets printed back in December of 2022.
And to be fair, some of these print dates aren't accurate with when they got released. To be fair.
Right. It's probably like a quarter after. It's like 3 months or so, probably.
But I mean, the overarching premise remains that you look at the lace set and spinning wheel kick, doesn't really count too much because it was an RTN promo. Not to take anything away from them, but it wasn't an armory promo. It was an RTN promo. Still a great promo. But when you talk specifically about armory events, it's just and before that, maybe Cut to the Chase. That's an all right one, a month before that. But there's not too many of them, and I'm not saying you got to print CNCs at the armory. Right. Understand what I'm saying.
Right.
But so once again, I'm not the only person to bring up this point. Somebody else brought it up. You feel like all those really cool sigil things from areas or really cool things, and I understand this might be a money thing, but just think of it for 1 second. I'm just gonna make up some random ass shit, but I think it's cool. Let's just say you're from I don't know, wherever, right? You're from San Francisco, right? I'd say the whole that area of Cali gets just a Golden Gate Bridge sigil because they fucking wanted to, right? And they're just this is the promo for the next 2 months. I think people would fucking show up for that. And you're hey, you can only get that a landmark from your area or your country or whatever. I'm just making crap up, but I think stuff like that would get people, and you could just make that the promo for 2 months. I don't think a single person would complain. Sigil of Solace, everybody plays it. Oh, a cool memento from where I live or where I grew up or whatever. Cool, let's do that. I think it's really cool that doing it for big events and stuff like that, but they seem to be doing it a lot overseas, which is very inaccessible for a lot of players, which is one thing. And then all the other promos they make are poopy. They're not great.
Yeah.
It's just it's just there could be a lot. You look at this one, Passing Mirage is a great one. Look at this one that was printed 2021 September. Passing Mirage, this thing's $30-$40. It's a great card. Everybody plays it. And then you go to release attention. Okay, cool.
I mean, I remember specifically, I made it out to an armory that I didn't necessarily want to go to. I had something going on, but they were giving out Macho Grande promos, and I was like, I want a place set of blue ones, right? And so I specifically made sure that I, either acquire a set, which increases the value, which incentivizes other people to go, or I, go to the event myself and make sure that I acquire one. So I 100%. And I wish I would have mentioned the promo thing earlier, but I'm glad you said something because it was something that I intended to cover. But yeah, we can go ahead and move on to the
original question being
5 and 6.
If you want to do that, I was going to answer the original.
Or go ahead. Go ahead. Did you miss something?
Yeah, no. But so like if we get to this Fab 3.0, if you want to call Fab 2.0 is like the last 3 to 6, maybe 9 months, and then this is like the waiting period until this elusive Fab 3.0 comes. I think it will be really cool, and I'd be ashamed if it's great and there's just, like you said, there's not enough players who make it to the finish line, so to speak. But unless there's two things that can happen, or three, I guess technically, is one, you could wait it out. We come to Fab 3.0 and it's like the greatest thing ever, and you've made so much synergy and cohesion between all these new sets and all these new cards that nobody even thinks about playing a lot of these old cards. I'm not saying these cards should never see play. I'm just saying if you think I'm being hyperbolic, go look at some of your decks. Like I know people I was talking to, like, yeah, my FI deck has 22 generics from like the first 2 or 3 sets.
Yeah.
Or like, oh my,
I'm a Briar player.
deck,
I understand. I understand.
Yeah, so like I'm not crazy to make this point, but if that's the case and they make these decks so synergistic and so good that you don't have to think about a lot of these cards, I think that's the perfect scenario and it's great. And I think that is what brings the class identity out. The second thing that can happen is you make it to this finish line, the quote unquote, 5-year plan. I know it's not really 5 years, I'm memeing on that, but the 5-year plan, comes to fruition, and you still see so many decks playing Tunic and playing CNC and playing E-Strike, and you never get to play all these cool things that the designers intended. I think that's going to be very sad. And the third option is that it just doesn't make it there. Like we just, the game falls off, and I'm not trying to doomsday post. I'm just saying the game falls off, and a lot of things go away, and then LSS has to go back to the drawing board. Like, what do we do? So I think it would be great if we can hit this Fab 3.0. So my opinion on it is, I think what they're doing by printing new cards is good. Printing new and quote unquote underpowered cards is a good thing. I think it's great. I think they should continue doing it to a degree, and I think they should make synergy between hero cards more important. Simultaneously, I also think by increasing LL points for a lot of these heroes and making them quote unquote LL too quick or rotate too quick is also a good thing. Get Dromai out, get all these heroes out, get all these polarized.
So they've done both of those. Yep.
Yes. The third thing I think they need to do is, in this quote unquote lame duck period, if you will, is to start, messing around with taking away Tunic. I know they just reprinted it and it might seem schizophrenic, but like, take away Tunic. Start testing without CNC. Start testing with a lot of these cards, because this will help push the format to newness in the immediate, while eventually still getting to your goal of this quote unquote Fab 3.0 at the same time. I don't think you need to and I don't think they're deliberately doing this, but I don't think you need to sentence people to like purgatory for the next 3, 6, 9, 12, however long it takes to get to the promised land, so to speak. I don't think you need to punish players for it, because like, what's the worst that could happen, right? Like you ban or suspend or whatever you want to call it, right? Tunic and CNC for the next like 6, 9 months, and then you finally get to your elusive Fab 3.0, and you're like, you know what, these cards aren't a problem anymore. Let's unsuspend them. Let's unban them. Let's do whatever, right? I don't think that's a bad thing, because it will, while simultaneously introducing new heroes and stuff, you'll also be like introducing new cards to the board. I know it sounds silly to say, but like when CNC and E-Strike and like D-Reacts or just whatever the cards are come out of the format, who knows what's going to take its place? People might reinvent the game. They're like, you know what, the 2 for 6, blah blah blah. Like that stuff's over. We need synergy. We need like taking a turn off the block, a really cool, powerful turn. I don't know what's going to happen, right? I'm not going to pretend I know. But to open up those avenues, other than can't play this card, just the worst CNC, can't play this, just the worst Tunic, and like taking away the identity of a lot of these heroes, I think can help propel the game quicker to Fab 3.0 than just sitting around and waiting. That's my answer to your question.
Do you think that transition is worth, because obviously everybody's going to be kind of upset about the financial hit, when Tunic gets banned, and then CNCs, they drop in 50% overnight, whatever normally happens. Do you think that the benefit would outweigh that?
I do, because if that was a real concern, in my opinion, then well, let me phrase this. There's 2 ways you could look at this. If that was a real concern, in my opinion, then I guess that's why the game is quote unquote potentially lagging in the US, is because you reprinted Crown, you reprinted Tunic, and all the finance bros are now broke and they quit your game. And I really don't think that's the case. So the second thing is, they've kind of been doing that. They've cut Crown by like 75%.
That's a good point. So like, what's another 35 bucks?
Of Crown.
Yeah. Okay.
Like Crown has been cut by like 75% from its quote unquote all-time high.
That's a good point.
All-time high and all-time low. That's a bad metric. But even if you just go off the median, like Crown was roughly 280-ish. It was like high as almost close to 400. We'll call it like a 250, 280 card. It's down to like 60, 70 bucks now. Are people quitting over that? I don't know. I can't say for sure. I'm not gonna pretend.
Right. No, that's a good point. Like, what's another 30 bucks?
They are. Tunic, the same thing. It was Tunic's like sub 100 now.
Right.
I think we've seen that people have kind of accepted this is going to happen, and the finance bros who are maybe in the game, like if they're not gone yet, they're not, And if they are gone, well, they've already gone, right? Like, why are we still making decisions around this theoretical person that we have to respect because of money in the game and blah 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 blah. And I'm not saying print cardboard to everything's 50 cents, because I know that kills the game too. But to act like Crown has to go and everybody's gonna be broke and we can't print new cards that are good, that are gonna be expensive, I think it's just a silly prospect. You know what I'm saying? Like, and I get it. There's EA
that makes
Tunics
sense.
and all these
Yeah.
things. And guess what? EA Tunics, I'm just gonna say it, like, if I remember correctly, it was like top 8 at an RTN. Is that what it was?
No,
Like,
you had to
top
win an
4?
RTN. You had to win an RTN.
Win an RTN? Wasn't
Yeah.
there 2 different forms of tunic? Wasn't there like an extended art and like the gold foil? I mean, not the gold foil, but like a cold foil. There's like a rainbow one and an extended non-rainbow one, isn't there? If I'm not mistaken?
No.
Wasn't there
The
multiple
RTN
versions or
promo
something?
was extended rainbow foil.
Okay. Wasn't there another one though?
No, the only other one is the
Okay.
gold foil that you got from winning the first set of callings.
Okay. Sure. So you got all those from the RTNs, and whoever has those, like, great for you, like, good for you, but like, it should be a collector's piece in the sense that, like, yeah, you won that at an RTN. That's really cool. It should be like something you hold close to you, whatever. And LL format, of course, will still be a thing. Don't even get me started in LL format, but
Sure.
you know, that'll always be a thing. And like, not to mention, like, I don't even care. Another reason that's a silly argument, unless you're somebody who went on the secondary market and bought like a 2, 3, 4, 5, 6K like tunic or whatever. One, I mean, here's my thing: if you buy things that expensive and then like you're gonna be down on your luck and starting like a GoFundMe or something because of that, well, I'm just gonna be honest, make better decisions in life. But number 2, if you spent that much money on a secondary thing, like, you clearly have disposable income, and that's whatever. So I really, like, as somebody who's old and like, I never really complain about money in card games because I'm more like, I'm blessed to be where I am in life. I don't care. I'll just be that. I don't care if you spent 3,000 of your disposable income and now it's worth like half. Like, congratulations, dude. Like, people are dying around the world. I don't care. Number 1, I know, base take, whatever. But like, number 2 is that, like, half of these expensive cards weren't like paid for, they were just earned at best. Like, they were earned. Like, you won an RTN. Like, what did that cost you?
Sure.
Like $40 and like some
Sure.
gas. Like, I don't care if your 10K memorabilia is now down to 5K. Like, I just, why should the developers care? Why should I care? Why should anybody care if the health of a game is being held back for your either speculative asset or you're just like, something I won that, it's like, if you won it and it's that special to you, you shouldn't care how much it's worth.
Right.
Like, in my opinion, if it's so special to you because you won and not because you have a shiny piece of cardboard that's worth a lot, you shouldn't care. Like I said, it's one thing for cards you purchase to like lose 80, 90, 10, 100% of the value, you know, that hurts because that's the developer, you know, it's something you literally bought that is now being worth less. I can see why people are like scorned by that. But to my other point, it's already happened. Crown is already down 75%. Tunic's already down 75%. This thing has happened. This mythical argument that if you ban it, it's happened. Like, I don't mean to be it's happened.
Yeah, no,
so, like,
when you first mentioned it, I was like, yeah, but it's going to cause like a financial ripple, and like money's kind of hard on the economy right now, and you know, people are, you know, a little less off, and so, but I mean, that's a good point. If they're already reprinting everything that's at a high market value, then I like, I'm getting roasted in chat right now because I'm supposed to be playing devil's advocate, but I mean the point.
I look good in shorts.
I mean the points are just like, I hate to say it, but they're just based. Like, I don't, like, you can't argue with that. Like, you just.
And like I said, I don't think these things might all be right. We might ban Tunic and realize, holy crap, like, the format's so slow. Dory can't play Shunt anymore. Like, I don't know, all these like random ripple effects. And maybe it needs to be walked back, right? But if we're already kind of conceding, and I won't say Ellis is saying this because they would never say this, if we're already kind of conceding that the next 6 to 9 months are going to be weird and wonky and probably dominated by certain people, things like that, I don't see, like, add another wrench in the, you know, add another wrench in the pile. What's the worst that's going to happen? If the next 6 to 9 months are going to be so bad that, I don't know, 10,000 people are going to quit. Oh, we're going to ban CNC. Guess what? 12,000 people are quitting now. Whatever. You know, what's the big deal at that point? You might as well try to like speed it up to this promised land, do something different. And I'm not saying all these cards need to go forever. Maybe they just go for a little bit and then maybe they come back. There's a reason I mean, and we've talked about this before and other things. Like, they have the verbiage suspended and banned for a reason. They should use it more in that same way. And they have, like Bullseye Bracers, right? It is suspended and it is going to come back. Nothing says you can't, like, suspend. And I hate, once again, to go back to Magic. Magic's done this a lot. We're like, hey, we're banning this card or unbanning this card. And like 3 months later, they're like, we're stupid. We're walking it back. I don't think most people are going to be like, oh, you made a decision that you thought was right, and then you walked it back 3 months later. Like, to me, that just shows, oh, you're like willing to take risks. You're willing to also take accountability, and that's great. Like I think that's a good thing. I don't think people would. I know I assume, putting myself in the developer's shoes, you like don't want to be wrong, I guess is the best way to, like, you don't want to be wrong. Like being wrong is like the worst thing. But I
Right.
really don't think it is in a game as complex as a card game. Being wrong for 2 years or something is way worse than being wrong for like a 3 month stand. I mean, like, oh yeah, we messed up. You know, like
Sure.
what is it? Was it the stubbies and like the dust blade, where it's just like they instantly knew and said, "Hey, we were wrong," instantly. And people were like, "Yeah." Like I don't think people were crying and complaining about that. And the reason, probably because most people didn't invest in those cards as much. Blah blah blah. We can get into all that. But I don't think there's ever a wrong time to admit you made a mistake. And I don't mean to get all, Sun Tzu on you, but it's just like, but it's just, I don't think there's ever a wrong time to admit you made a mistake. And that's just,
There is
yeah.
one good point in chat. Somebody said that Tunic allows underdeveloped heroes to be played. Like,
Yes.
that
Do we still
is
have
a valid
underdeveloped
point.
heroes?
That
But that's my question though. Do we still have underdeveloped heroes? Because if we do, that's a bigger problem, right? If you're, and I don't mean to harp on this, but I'm not even reading who you are. I'm not even like acknowledge you. I'm not going to humanize you in the way, because I don't want to be mean. I'm just going to
yeah, yeah.
take that comment, and I don't want to personalize it against you. But I'm just like, is that really the case? I understood that argument maybe a year, 2, 3 years ago.
Sure.
If we still have heroes that are underdeveloped due to the lack of Tunic, there's probably a bigger problem than that. I like, if Bolton is still underdeveloped because we take away Tunic, I
Mm-hmm.
think that says more. Now, maybe, yeah, sure, in the future, like a merchant might come out, or a
Yeah,
pirate
that'd
or
be like,
something,
or
right?
Alchemist comes out, or
Sure,
Necromancer, or
right. And
whatever.
it's like,
Like,
oh man, they could really use this thing.
right.
Okay, possibly. But guess what you can do? When you print these new heroes, you can print them with like a suite of legendary. I'm not saying all 4, but like 1 or 2 legendary pieces, and nobody's going to complain. Whereas if you print these new alchemists with a legendary chest, it either needs to be so much better than Tunic that it's busted, or it's never going to be played at all. That's the fine line with Tunic. You either print a
Right.
card that is
Right.
so much better than it, think, Furnace because Ash, or think, Tectonic Plate, and even though Bravo still will sometimes, or Guardians will still sometimes play Tunic, or like Foundry Heart, like whatever it is. If you like, nothing says, oh, if we have Tunic, you have no viable chess piece. Guess what? You're the developers of the game. You print a new base hero, you give him a base chess piece. Like the end. Like I don't like. I understand. I don't like think that's a dumb point, because for a while it was very true. There were so many heroes who were
Right.
underdeveloped that they didn't have anything else to play. But I feel like that's like a baby step thing, right? That was something. Hey, like that's to my original point a while ago. Like that's the point of generics, in my opinion. Like I said back in Hearthstone, they
Yeah.
filled gaps that
Good
design
gaps,
space
yep.
couldn't cover. But we're pushing on what, year 4 now. If we still need it to cover gaps, I think there's something missing, and you have to go back to the drawing board or whatever it is. And I don't mean to harp on the devs in a way and say they don't know what they're doing. But if that's the argument, and I'm not saying that LSS has this argument, I'm just referring to whoever this person was that made this comment. If that is truly a worry, I think there's bigger problems. That, I mean, and I could be wrong 100%, but I think there's bigger problems if year 4 of a game you can't print heroes because like Tunic isn't around. You're like, oh, they're just going to be useless. Print new cards, print better cards, print more unique cards. Like, it's your cardboard, you own it.
I agree. All right, so you want to move on to point 5 and 6 on the tweet?
Yeah, and then so I'm gonna be mean, but
I know.
who I just need to know like who he's talking to that says BL is an all-time draft set. And I'm not saying this to be completely rude. Like, some people might like BL or Bright Lights, some people might not like it, whatever. I personally do not like it a lot. But I cannot imagine who thinks it's an all-time format. And the reason I say this is just strictly because when anybody else in the world that I know thinks of draft, it's like, I'm going to draft cards. I'm going to like take a card, think about it. What is the person to my right playing? What is the person to my left playing? There's multiple heroes. There's multiple avenues. Realistically, Bright Lights boils down to like everything's mech, so everything's playable. You're either choosing aggro with cool cards, or like items with this, or generally what most people are doing, Teklo Fatigue Pile. And I'm not even going to get into these arguments. I don't want to talk meta and all this, but like, how can it be an all-time draft set if you're literally just, it's not even drafting, it's just a card picking simulator. And I don't mean to be hyperbolic, but it's just like, if every card is playable, that already just takes the drafting aspect out of it for me. It's like, okay, I'm playing like sealed light at this point. I'm not saying there's no signals, and I'm not saying there's no decision points, but it really just comes down to a spreadsheet simulator. Is this card better than this? Cool, I pick this, and I just move on, right? Because like, there's no hate picks in this format, right? Like, if I see System Reset and I'm in Teklo, I'm just gonna take it because it's yellow and it's 3 block, and I want nobody else to have it. Whereas in other formats, if I see like, Luminaris and I'm 18 picks into Levia, I pick it as a hate pick, but there's a cost to that. They have this argument in Magic all the time. Like, is it worth hate drafting because you make your own deck weaker? Blah, 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 blah. These are all valid concerns in draft. They're like, oh, you do this, you do that, you do this, you do that. Is hate drafting right? Do I expect the person to my left? If I know the person to my left's on Bolton, do I let them waste the hate drafts, like this prisoner's dilemma thing, whatever?
Right.
These are all things that go in draft. And I think, once again, Outsiders was the best draft set they printed, hands down. I think it's the
I
best
agree.
one. 6
I
playable
agree.
heroes, split cards. Sealed was awful, like it usually is, because it's fatigue piles. But the draft was great. I think all heroes I've won with like 35 card Riptide decks and RTNs. Like, I've won with everything in between. Obviously, Assassin is kind of like the easier deck and sometimes the better deck to play. I think it was
Right.
the best one. And we unfortunately had to go back to Monarch, which you can feel how you feel about that.
Oh,
And now we've gone
yeah.
to Bright Lights. Yeah, and now we've
Yeah.
gone to Bright Lights. I hate that. Like, I personally hate that. Like, Bright Lights is like, I get it. They wanted to do the crack shuffle play thing. Mech definitely needed support. 100% agree. I personally hate single sets like this. I think it alienates a lot of players, and then box sales go low, and then we start this whole discourse on like why things aren't selling, yada yada yada. And they try to like hamper that with like the expansion slop, and there's only 15 cards, and only like 2 of them are good. And then it was
Mm-hmm.
just like, oh, I guess Tunic reprint if you count 3, and it's just like, that's weird. So all the cards you printed for the set kind of just got eclipsed by things like Tome and Tunic reprint. I just very much dislike the single hero or single class set. Don't like that at all.
Well,
But
let's talk
yeah.
about bright lights for a sec, because I think that the way LS, of course, this is all speculation, right? I don't have any inside information or anything, but like the way that I assume this set came about is I think it actually started from crack shuffle and play. I
It's
think
possible, yeah.
I think they were like, we need a way to where people can just get into this set or get into the game in a super easy, very like, you know, just a very convenient way. And I think that's kind of where, and then that decision to do the crack shuffle and play led to, obviously you have to do a single class, and then within that you have
Yeah.
constraints of like you have all the cards that are like powered down, because if they weren't, then like shit would just be like everybody just boosting each other until the first person died. So that kind of led to like the lower power level. But I mean, do do you think that's not a good idea to do the
Which
crack
part?
shuffle,
Like,
to go so heavy into the crack shuffle and play?
so crack shuffle play, here's my thing, and we talked about this before. I don't hate or like crack shuffle play. I think it is a choice, and we will see what like fruit that, choice bears, for lack of a better term, excuse me. But my bigger thing is with crack shuffle play is the idea was to get people into the game, generally make it an easy sit down, $10, $15 buy, whatever it is. I don't know how much exactly is, depending on where you live. And you buy it, you play, it's easy to digest, blah blah blah. And this goes back to points that we've talked about before, and I think it was the biggest mistake I was ever told getting into Fab, and I think many of you can potentially agree with me. And not to go on a tangent, but just like, I was told, oh, Blitz is the beginner format. It's smaller decks, it's cheaper, blah, blah, blah. And spoiler, I hate Blitz. I think it is so top heavy. Money matters so much more. The games are so much shorter. The power cards are that much more important. The expensive equipment is that much more important.
Sure.
Secondary reason I do not like that format is it's touted by a lot. I'm not saying LSS said this, but the community as a whole tries to tout Blitz as a beginner friendly format because, oh, you could play more games. They're quicker. They're less decks, yada, yada. Okay, let's go with that premise. Yes, the games are quicker. So when you show up to an armory and your deck stinks, you just get, shit on in 2 turns, and then it's like, oh well, like at least we could play again really quick. And it's like, okay, like you're not helping anybody there. Nobody's really learning. Nobody's really doing anything. And let's just say the opposite happens. You buy a Blitz deck. You buy your Blitz pre-con, and you're like, oh, I love this. I won a few games. This game's really fun. Hey, Bob, like store owner, where do I go next? Like, what do I do next? Oh, well, you picked the Dromai deck. Ooh, I know I'm picking the worst example. You now have a deck where you need to go online, buy like 40 dragons for like
The
78
Dromai deck
cents
that
each.
has no dragons in it.
Yeah, you got to go buy 40 dragons that are like 87 cents each from like 72 different people. The most important dragon comes from some dude in like Topeka, Kansas. He didn't put shipping on it. It takes 92 days to show up. It gets lost in the mail. Oh, so then you wait like 3 weeks. It all finally comes in the mail, and like you're ready to play. And then like, oh,
uh,
like I don't know, the meta shifted, or my local store closed down, or who the hell knows. Like, I think they've always missed the mark personally by not having CC precon decks. I know people like to say CC's heavy and CC's like hard to play, but I'd rather like if you and me are sitting and we watch some new player come in, he's gonna pick up this arbitrary CC precon I'm talking about, and he's just gonna play the game. And me and you are both gonna look at each other while he's sitting down across from like whatever hero with a tunic and CNC's big, yo, this guy's lost. He just doesn't know it. At least that person's gonna play like 11, 12, 13 turns of Flesh and Blood, block a little bit, learn about the game, do whatever,
Right.
and like enjoy the game, learn things, learn how the game really plays, learn value, learn all these intricate pitch stack, whatever it is. He can learn these things. He or she or they can learn this, can learn this, but you can't when the game ends in 2 turns. And then the onboarding process is so bad. Like crack shuffle play is cool, but I still don't think it onboards you to the game in any way, shape, or form. And most people come back to me when I say this. Oh well, my community has like this local philanthropist. He's like he owns Patagonia and he brings all his cards and he like builds everybody decks and he gives them cards for free. That is great. I love that you have Patagonia CEO in your local like stores. But that is not a sustainable business model. It doesn't make sense. I've always said for a very long time, like I think Bravo's a perfect example. You make a Bravo like CC precon, you make it like $80. You print a purple bordered like tectonic plating for all I care, so the collectors don't go up in a tizzy. And you just give them like a whole deck. You don't have to give them cripplings and spinals, but you give them most of the deck. You give them tectonic. You give them like 4 null rune pieces, like 3 iron rot pieces. You give them an 80 card deck. You add like Oasis, Sigil, Sink Belows, and you're like, hey, this is an 80 card deck. This is how the game plays. This is how sideboarding works. This is what you can or can't do. Play a bunch with it. Have fun. If you like this deck, oh, by the way, you can buy these packs and get like Crippling Crush, or you can buy this like expensive legendary. Like you can work up to Crater Fist, even though it's really not that expensive. Like whatever, right? And you can give somebody a guideline into the game with a deck that's playable for a nominal fee. They have a clear path to upgrade this deck. You can even print out a little pamphlet. I think Yu-Gi-Oh does it. It's like, hey, like cards you might like are these. You can find them in our sets called blah blah blah. And I think that's like a fine thing to do. You show up to a store, you spend $40, $50. You get a construction. Like the dual decks were kind of what that was supposed to do, though. It was sorry, I called them dual decks. I don't really call it that. It's like Reinhardt Classic Battles, excuse me.
Right.
Reinhardt versus Dory. They kind of did this, but they kind of missed the mark because like they were blitz decks, and the only reason you bought that was really to get Glistening Steel Blade, and you had to buy 3 of them, and a lot of people saw that as grimy and dirty, and I won't even get into that. But I just think printing like heroes like that, Katsu could be any hero, right? Like, and I know some heroes have a very expensive piece, and you don't want to water down the price of it too much. But I think like Tectonic isn't that expensive to begin with, so it really wouldn't ruin the price there. I think it's a very fair, very straightforward, very normal deck, and somebody could learn the game from that. I don't think blitz decks were ever the answer, and they printed them for a very long time. And once again, in their defense, they haven't printed them in a while. They don't seem like they want to, and it seems like with PvE and other things, they're hopefully going in different ways to onboard you into the game. I still think for a very long time they have missed the mark on not doing CC precons. Like I just really think they missed the mark on that, and they continue to, and it's unfortunate. And I don't know, when it's going to come in to do that. But I just think blitz decks are not it. Like, yeah, you can sit down and play 2, 3, 4, 5 games and get stomped every time. You're just not going to learn the game. I think, and another thing people say, and once again, I'm not saying LSS says this, they think like CC is too heavy, it's too dirty, it's too hard to play. Like, I think you should think higher of your player base. You should assume more of them. And I know that's a hot take, but like, assume they're not idiots. Let them play. Like, let them explore it. I don't think, like, when you play CC, it's really not that hard. Like, I think it's, if you played a card game before, and even if you haven't, I just think more people like, and I'm a big board game guy too, like, so I understand like onboarding people in. Like, there's certain games I will not play with people, but then there's certain games like, hey, like Kingsburg is a great game. It's a very entry level like Euro board game, and I love introducing people to that game because it's like kind of like Monopoly but a little more skillful. And it teaches you like resource management. It teaches you like a lot of these things that to get you into heavier board games. But I'm not gonna walk in and like plop Gloomhaven in front of somebody or Scythe or something. Like, I'm just not gonna do that because I'd be like psychotic. So I understand not overwhelming your people too much, but I don't think CC is that crazy. If you build precons like that, write a little guidebook in it. You can get Matt Rogers could write it and probably rap on it or something, and like give you a really cool like videography thing to look at to learn how to play Bravo. Maybe even Dash, who knows? But like I think that's way better than crack shuffle play. So if this set was made in such a way, and bright lights is what came out of that, I don't know how to feel about that, and I think they could have tackled stuff better. Like, the professors thing, I think was a great thing. I want to give kudos where kudos is due. I think that would be great. Something like that. So to answer your just question overall, if that's why it was made that way, cool. And as somebody mentioned in chat, Brian said they will never do a single like class set again for 2-year lease. So I think that's a great decision. We talked about that before, or a few weeks ago, with like the heavy hitters thing. We're like, there's no way they're going to do another singular set. Like, you don't take a risk like this twice. He said that. So I agree with that. And obviously we know that to now not be the case. So And then really just to go to 6, Teklo ruins the Bright Lights drafts. I mean, I'm not going to speak to certain things because I test with certain people and am privy to certain information, but I don't think that opinion is too far off. And the reason I say that is I know there are valid dash strats out there for Bright Lights.
Right.
My problems with the dash strat is it's not that it's a bad strat. It's
It's
just like it's kind of
dependent
like
on what's in the
Levia.
packs.
Right, it's dependent on what's in the pack, and it's also kind of like Levia, right? Where it's like Monarch is made in a way to where you're like, hey, like 3 people could be this, 2 people could be this, 2 people could be that, like whatever. The dash plan is very doable in Bright Lights. There is a very good dash deck out there. The problem is it can almost never support 2.
Right.
And then it just becomes like this weird prisoner's dilemma while you're drafting, like who's going to be the first to bite for the dash? What if I do
Right.
it and the guy 4 seats away from me doing it? And to me, that's not drafting. Because in Monarch, you can do that and be like, hey, I'm going to be the Levia. And some guy 4 seats away can still be the Levia, and you could still have a very good 2 Levia deck. We watch Michael Hamilton do it all the time at Nats.
Right.
Like learning how to play around fatigue, all these things. It's not as possible to do in Bright Lights. Like, yes, there can be like one dash deck. There's almost never going to be 2 or 3, and the only time they're ever going to 2-1 is probably if they play each other in the first round. Like realistically,
Right.
like it's just the Teklo fatigue 40 card variant pile just seems to be the prevailing strategy. There are some cracked max decks out there. There are the one of gem dash deck, but I don't think they're as prevalent as the 6 or 7 Teklo pods. And it's not just me saying this. We saw the battle hardened at Dallas. It was like 5 or 6 Teklos and like 2 dash or like and 1 max, like something around that. It was still predominantly Teklo in a 3 hero format. And I know technically if there's a 3 hero format, one of them has to be more dominant, but like it's just kind of crazy, and it makes the drafting experience boring to me. You're just picking cards. If you happen to open a bunch of Evos, you play Teklo. If you happen to open the legendary dash pool, like you play dash. I don't think, to me, that's not drafting. That's just not fun. Like, and they don't have to cater to the game to me. I get that. I just don't see how it's drafting. It just feels like sealed light, and that's not fun to me. And I do think Teklo ruins it because if you do have a 40 card quote unquote pile, why would you not play the hero that starts at 20 and gets the recur cards from his graveyard? It just makes sense. It's the natural progression of things. Max is really good if you can actually make use of Banksy and make use of all these cards. And the sad part is some people play Max and just queue up Leveler anyway. And that's really funny to me for a lot of reasons. And some people play Leveler Dash, and I don't even want to get into that. But it's just like, is that an all-time format? I don't know who said that was an all-time format. I'm not saying Brian's lying. I'm obviously somebody has told him this.
Right.
Multiple people. But I just find these last 2 points funny. I just do not like highlights at all. Both from a competitive standpoint, CC wise, and then just draft. I don't think it's a fun draft set. I think to your point, maybe for crack shuffle play, it's more digestible, it's more easy. You don't get, as people have complained a lot in Fab, you don't get punished as much for picking bad cards or like not having 30 playables. Yes, I agree. That was always a big point. Druid brought off that point a bunch. Like how Magic, you actually have to choose down to your 30, whereas Fab, sometimes you're like scrambling to get to 30. I do think that could have been a problem for newer players, but
Right.
I think this was just, the pendulum is too far in the other direction this way. I think if people complain about variance in Fab and how the better player always wins, I think that will be 1,000% exacerbated in Bright Lights draft, because most games are going to come down to value fatigue wars, and the better player is almost always going to win that between pitch stacking skill and unknowing how to evaluate cards. So I also don't think it's good from that perspective.
Right. Right. So on these 6 points, we kind of like gone over. I guess the main point that we drove from the start was that all 6 are kind of true. I think the only one that you truly questioned was number 5. Not to say that Bright Lights is a bad draft set. It just, there's no way it's better than Outsiders. Like, there's no shot. But with that being said, so if the point is that like X amount of people are saying that rotate too slowly, too quickly, too much power creep, not enough, who do you listen to if you're the devs? If you're the, if you're Brian and you're designing this stuff, I mean, like, what carries more weight if both things are true?
Right. I mean, if both things are true, what carries more weight? I don't think either has to carry more weight. I think you say, and I'm not saying they're not doing this. If you say heroes are rotating too slowly, the people who are saying that are generally your competitive players. So you just got to look, how do we stymie that? If heroes are rotating too slowly, how do we stymie that? In my opinion, to go back to your first segment, I don't think LL, and should be the primary like focus of how a hero goes out. I think active suspensions, active bans, active things like that are just way better. I think, like you said, the quote unquote let it ride area, I think creates a lot of these, like, going mule, if you will, for anybody who speaks that language, just stagnant water. Just it's a stagnant water. It's just all you get. Nothing good ever comes of stagnant water. Like, it's just,
Right.
that's what it is. It's just, it just sits there. You never know what's going to happen. You're miserable. Oh, is the new LL going to come out? And everybody gets the copium like 2-3 weeks before the ban announcement. It's like, oh my god, it's going to happen. It's going to happen. And they pull like a magic on you, and they're like, there is no bans and no information. Bye. And I'm like, oh great, can't believe I waited all month for this. Like, it just creates a lot of like, it just creates a lot of misery. I think active bans, suspensions, whatever it be, can help the heroes rotate too slowly thing for your competitive players. And I don't think it affects your heroes rotate too quickly, right? Because when a hero rotates too quickly, what people's complaint really is that I lose value out of my cards, or I lose my favorite hero, or I can no longer play the things I like to play. If you ban, let's just say Voltaire, for example, if this would have happened 6 months ago, people can still play Lexi. If you're a true Lexi truther, you love it, you always want to play it, you queue up Death Dealer, you find a way to do it, and maybe the deck's not as good as it is, but you still own your cards. Like, heroes rotate too quickly. Your hero doesn't rotate. It just maybe got worse, right? But if you're worried about your cards losing value and you not being able to play the deck you love to play, you still get to play it. It's just not as strong. So I think, like, you can tackle these points at once, and I'm not saying this is a perfect solution to anything, and I'm not even saying my solution is the perfect solution. However, you can tackle both of these things at once, and I think it's through active bans and suspensions. You will stop. It'll make it feel like heroes are rotating quicker than they are for the people who are saying it's too slowly, and then for the people who are worried about their purchases or their hero identity, they won't rotate more quickly because they'll hopefully be gaining less LL points. And once again, in their defense, they tried to make a ban with Bullseye Bracer, but I think we all knew that wasn't going to do too much. And I think, again, in that post, they also admitted Voltaire was the problem. They just didn't want to ban it for whatever their reasons may be. And I think that's how you solve 1 and 2 together at the same time. Like people talking about the appropriate time for a hero to LL. Like, I don't know what the appropriate time is, but I don't think the devs do, or even you who asking that question knows either. I don't think anybody knows, right? Because you have heroes like Katsu and Bravo who've been around since the dawn of man, and you've had heroes who haven't made it 4 months.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know what the problem is. I think LL is good from that perspective, like the chain, prism, Starvo type of things, where it just gets a problem out really quick before you could legitimately ban it. I think that's like the ceiling of LL. I think that's what it does best. It just quickly catches mistakes. But as they've been getting better at developing, and COVID has ended, and things like that, quote on hashtag COVID ended, like, they haven't been making those mistakes as much, and I think that's great. But I still think it is not, oh well, if they don't LL in 3 or 4 months, then like there is no timeline. Like, no, I think like Bravo and Katsu, they probably should have LL'd by now. Like, I don't know, but they're not. I
Right.
could wish it as much as I want, but they're not. They're not LL'd. And there's other heroes that LL'd in 3-4 months. I don't know. Nobody knows what the right time frame is, but I think looking at it as this like heuristic of like, oh, like if a hero's too good, it's going to LL in this arbitrary amount of time, or if it's too bad, it's going to take this long. You just never know that, and I don't think that's what it's designed to do, and it shouldn't be designed to do that.
Right.
Just doing what every other game does, and just active bans and suspensions. And then, like, if you make a mistake and something happens to LL, sure, but I don't think that's the case. It's like we've seen. I think the mistakes were Chain, Starvo, like Prism. Those are maybe the mistakes era. But then like the old him onward meta has been like the, we know this thing is broken, but we don't want to ban Crown of Seeds because of investors or whatever that arbitrary thing is. And then it's like it slowly erodes and just like rips apart the format. And like Lexi's kind of the next thing, and who knows what the next thing will be. I don't think that's the worst of LL. I think old him onwards was the worst we've seen of LL. And then like the things before it were the best we've seen of LL. So everybody had a good impression. Oh, this hero sucked. Well, not sucked, but like this hero sucked for us to play against. We hated Starvo, we hated this. It got banned quick. Great. And the next phase of like LL was this hero's really goddamn good, really oppressive. It ruins a bunch of strategies, but it maybe didn't win 1,100 freaking points in 3 months, but it still sucked for 9 months. I don't know.
So
I don't think there's a perfect time.
Let's pivot. We have a conversation brewing in chat, and it kind of started with somebody mentioned. I'm going to read something from chat, and then I'm also going to read a message that I got. They said, I appreciate this discussion. Brian's post almost made me completely quit the game. I thought I was the one feeling this way, and I just play casually right now. And also, let me switch screens real quick. I got a message And then somebody's basically, to summarize, they basically said that he comes off very antagonistic, right?
Yes, yes.
And when people voice genuine concerns, he does kind of take them personal sometimes. We kind of saw that where with the good old abacus, the situation, which we remedied, right? We solved that
Right.
and everything, but like,
Yeah.
and they mentioned that it kind of creates bad faith when
Yes.
kind of discussing it. So there's kind of two pieces to that situation, right? Because there's a situation where you have access to the devs, like a face to LSS, right?
Yes.
And that's something that's like against the grain as far as like like it Hasbro would never do that, right? With Magic, like there's no shot,
Right.
right?
You never get aligned to the devs. So it is like a boon that it's like really cool. Oh, our devs are cool. They engage with the community. That's a nice
Right.
thing to have, like to a point. But to other people's points in chat, it's like, and like I said before, like having a community manager would be great. Like you said, he takes things some personal to us. And once again, this is not a slight against him. Like I said, it's not a Brian Gottlieb problem or anything like that.
Right.
It is just a human problem. When you put something and you wear it on your sleeve and somebody tells you what's wrong with it, you're gonna be rightfully pissed. I'm not saying any other
Right.
dev or
No,
any other
I
person in
agree.
the world
I
would
agree. Yeah.
handle it better or worse than he would. It's
100%.
just nature. It's human
Right.
nature.
Right. Right.
And so, like people said, he does come across as snarky sometimes, or he makes people like that guy who maybe just wanted to feel like he's being gaslit, like somebody said. And that's a very strong word to use, but yeah, sure, we'll use that word. And I also agree to somebody else's point. Some people are way too critical of Brian as a person, and then they like tweet really messed up stuff at him too. And I'm not saying like, and I don't want to give like the he should be bigger than that thing because he's a dev. He's not like a senator or something. But it's just like, well, maybe not the senators in this country, but it's just like, you know, people are way too rude to him sometimes, and he is also snarky in response, and it makes some people feel like, oh, I'm the idiot, I'm being gaslit, or I'm the idiot, like, or they feel like snarky response. The one thing I got on, I didn't personally get on Brian, 'cause I don't talk to him, I'm not friends with him at all, but I mentioned it to you. After day one at Dallas, Brian gave the snarky tweet, oh, I guess warmongers didn't kill Azalea. Because like Levi and one other person did pretty well, and they were like 6-0 or 7-0. And the only reason I didn't make this tweet is because I've talked to Levi once and he's very nice, and I didn't mean this anything personal against him. But after day two came around and all the good decks and good players got to the top tables, most of those Azaleas kind of, didn't do too hot and like pretty much got like walked over. And I wanted to tweet at Brian saying, hey, how's that warmonger doing? Like, and I didn't because I'm not that type of person, even
Right.
though I
Right.
am. But I'm
Yeah.
just
Yeah.
like, when you give snarky comments like that to probably the 90 to 100 people who still somehow play Azalea, and they're just dying at their local armories and like RTNs just getting blown out by like warmongers, and like Levi, Justin, and maybe like 4 other people on the face of the earth are good enough to sometimes play around it and things like that. It doesn't make those people feel better because you made some snarky posts saying, hoo, got you at warmongers. And once again, I'm not saying Brian can't tweet what he does or doesn't want to tweet. But I'm just saying, hopefully, since Bright Lights and Round the Table and everything's so successful, according to some people in chat who think the game's doing great, I hope they got a lot more money so they can hire a PR manager so
Right.
we don't have to directly always interact with the devs for our first line of information, because it's like the honeymoon period, right? It's like, oh, Brian came, he's saving the game, he's made really good decisions, and I support almost all the things he's done.
Yep.
And then the game's really good, and it's like he's really cool on Twitter, and we high five each other, and he drinks beers with us on the weekend, and he like lets us stay up late and watch TV. Brian's cool, right? And then the bad happens, right? And it's just like, oh god, the honeymoon phase is kind of over. We don't like this, we don't like that, and suddenly the camaraderie he's had with maybe certain people or just his attitude on Twitter, he starts being a little snarky back or a little memey here and this is that. And once again, he could do whatever he wants, and most people like me see it for what it is. It's a joke.
Mhm.
There's a lot of people between me and the person who's a Karen who are just going to feel like not great about the
Right.
way
Right.
he's portraying himself or
Right.
portraying the game or how he's downplaying my opinions and being like, harsh on them, yada, 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 yada.
Yep.
That all being said, Twitter is also a bad form of discussion, but I don't think it's the worst form of discussion. And I also think it's the discussion we have, because other than 2 white guys like me and Nathan who are up to like 12 o'clock at night talking, most people don't have the time to do all this. People are going to have the time for maybe 20 minutes to give out a few opinions and give like the gist
Right.
of their thing, and that's going to be it. And once again, Fab is not that big of a game. The biggest medium for Fab is in person itself, in the flesh and blood, or on Twitter. And like that's really all you got. Those are your two main forms. We don't really have a big Reddit presence. We don't really have a big, TikTok. There's no dancing Tomal time memes. We haven't got any cool. That's the biggest problem is you Zoomers. Where the hell's the cool TikTok fab
I
content?
know,
That's why
right?
the game's dying. What the hell's
That
their problem? Seriously, we
so
got we got Joe
that's
Biden, Kanye West, Femberger playing Beyblade. What the hell are the rest of you doing?
yeah.
I hate the youth, man. I hate the youth. Seriously, you should go to war at 12 now. But anyway, go on.
That's too good. But all right, so but going back to the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3. What do you think LSS can do better to kind of smooth out, because we know they realized that they did wrong in phase 1. It was overtuned. I think everybody agrees to the end goal of what they're trying to accomplish. I don't think anybody disagrees
Yes.
with it.
Yeah, I
What
think it would be great.
do you think is a few ways that they can kind of smooth out that transition?
I mean, not to beat the dead horse because I kind of got on this for is potentially looking at some of the older generics, older, very prominent cards, tuning them back, doing all these things. And I think that's a great thing to get us where most people want to be. I think most people want to play Teklo. Most people want to play Levia. Most people want to play Prism. Most people want to play, Lavia. So many people want to play these heroes. It's just very unfortunate when you can't. And the option is to either be like very semi non-competitive, not great, have fun. Maybe once in a while you spike something, but that's not fun for most people. People want to feel like they have a puncher's chance. And I don't think you can when a lot of these heroes are just eclipsed by other heroes in power. And even when they get really cool things to do, they're just eclipsed by like deck building restrictions of like, oh, well, you got to play CNC or you got to play Tunic or you got to play this. If you don't play it, somebody else is going to play it. And it just ruins a lot of stuff. So to answer the question, lower power, both in design and in banning and suspending. I think taking some of these cards out and making just make Flesh and Blood be about the heroes and the cards and what they bring to the table. I'm not saying ban every generic ever and that they don't have room in the game. I just think there's a lot of the old ones that should go. I think that gets us to phase 3, quote unquote, faster than not. I just think I nobody knows, and I don't know. This could all be fixed in 3 to 6 months. Who knows? But going this way, this is my prediction: is that Lexi's gonna go, and then somewhere between Dromai, Icelander is gonna go, and then once they go, maybe Bravo, Rhinar, Azalea, Dash are gonna be really strong, and it's gonna feel like that. And I think maybe when those heroes go, everything will feel a little less powerful. My problem with that is I don't know how long that's going to last. And once again, I hope to be completely wrong, but I don't know if it will be. I just don't know if it will be. And I see some people talking in chat, and I think people made a point that it sucks that we have to have this conversation all the time, and I do agree. But I do think there are some people who just do this because they like misery. I mean, I agree with that. That all being said, I think a lot of people have these complaints because, like I said, I'm 30. I've seen this happen with so many games. I've seen games be more successful in FAB. I've seen games be less successful in FAB. All games that have where flashes in the pan, and there's always just consistent sentiments that the game has, or sentiments that the community has, or things that go on, and they all end in the same thing, which is usually a dead game. And I don't want that to happen to FAB because, like I said, I got older and I don't want to sit at computers because I do it for my day job. So I like being able to get out more, getting out to meet people, play more, things like that. And FAB allows me to do that. I got old man wrists. I can't, play Dota anymore or anything like that. So I want to play card games. I just don't want to be where I was when I was 18, 19, where it was like, I'm playing Vanguard, I'm playing Magic, I'm playing Yu-Gi-Oh, blah, 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 blah. And it's just like you're jumping from game to game. You're trying to manage all these things. And it's just like, it's not, it gets tiring, especially, like you said, wife, kids, whatever. And I'm sure I'm not the only one. And I want this to be the game that lasts for a very, very long time. I'm not going to say it's going to be infinite. Nothing ever is, but I like it to last for more than, whatever it is. So I don't think people are like doing this so we can be like, give us everything. Some people might be, but it's like, give us everything we want, yada, yada, yada. I just think people want some of the devs to realize, like, you have a few thousands of people who are beholden to so many heroes or so many play styles or whatever it is. And it feels like some of them are just being overshadowed. And I think there's multiple avenues to handle it. And I don't think kind of sitting on your hands is the best approach always.
I mean, I can get down with that. I will say, to kind of counter the generic argument, I mean, like I kind of mentioned on before, generics are very pivotal pieces to a lot of classes game plans that don't have access to those tools. Not every class has class dependent D-reacts and things like that, or at least not good ones. And so like they rely on those. CNC, the thing about banning CNC would be like, I don't want to be a game in a game state where like you can willy nilly like just arsenal a card and know that it's perfectly safe always.
Sure.
That's like one dynamic that I really enjoy about the card is like there's actually a calculated decision on, especially if you're playing against certain decks, especially like Guardians, like there was all the time against Oldham. If your Crown of Providence
CNC
was,
pummel, yeah.
yeah, if your Crown of Providence wasn't up, like you had to really make a decision: do I really arsenal this power card, or do I go ahead and blow it now for a little bit less like value, just to guarantee that I actually get to play it? So I do kind of like that dynamic. I guess we're both
Right.
kind of saying the same thing, just taking different approaches. You kind of want to cut the legs out from under it, whereas I just want to shave it off the top. I'm kind of in favor of like one big,
Yeah.
I say
But there are
big.
other cards that like attack the arsenal, and I think it's one of those things too to go back to class identity. Like there are cards like, Wreak Havoc, which kind of does that, not the same, obviously. There are cards like the new Dory card. There are Disable, if I'm not mistaken, sinks the card. There are cards that do affect the arsenal. It's just that when you compare most of them to CNC, why would you ever play those cards? Like, unless there's a strict reason, like obviously Disable or whatever it is in Bravo, you have to play it's the blue, it's a popper, blah, blah, blah.
Right.
But it's just like you could, I mean, they've shown they can print other cards that attack the arsenal.
Right.
And also to a secondary point, I don't think that every hero should be able to attack the arsenal. Like Fi is a great example.
Mhm.
Fi, you are a ninja. You are at best stealthy, and at most you are furious. You are throwing many strikes. You are throwing many, daggers, swords, whatever you want to call it. Combo fighting. Your thing is to do damage. You shouldn't be too heavy on disruption to begin with. So unless you want to make a card like Breaking Point, right, which is like, hey, you got to do a bunch of punches and kicks and backflips, and you play Breaking Point, you get their arsenal. That's really cool. I don't think you should be able to block 6 and then send 6 that attacks your arsenal. It doesn't feel very ninja-y to me. It just doesn't really make sense. Think that's more so my thing is that like you can have ways to attack the arsenal in certain classes, and you can make certain classes like Guardian, let's just say, who's slower and more, clunky, be able to do it easier. And then you could have classes like Fi or something who you have to work a little harder for because you have so many other pros about your hero. And I'm just using those as an example. I'm not saying Fi needs to have Command and Conquer Banner. I'm just bringing that up as a point. That
Mhm.
like there's a lot of heroes that you can give them cards that attack the arsenal in different avenues. Dory has the Emboldened Blade. There's other heroes that do it. And as somebody said in chat, E-Strike is another big card I think should potentially go. I don't think it's as big as CNC, but I do think it eats up a lot of slots in decks for a lot of reasons because it's just generically good, generically modular, et cetera, et cetera. So I don't like that card either. But to go to your point, I understand the premise of like CNC potentially like makes games a little brain dead. Cause it's like, oh, like you can Arsenal and just like have the combo in your Arsenal for 15, 16 turns, whatever. But I also think it would open up people maybe not having to play Crown of Providence all the time too. Maybe being able to explore different headpieces for their heroes. So I mean, I do think there's some pros to it as well.
Yeah, I mean, like I was saying, was like I think the approach that I would take is like not a heavy ban. It's not the right word, but like a decent ban to just bring down the power level. And I don't think it's necessary to attack the generics. You could. That could be like one aspect of it.
Right.
But like let's say, I don't know, collectively they took out Voltaire, Codex of Frailty, and like any like kind of like value offenders in the game, right?
Sure.
And just remove those in like one wave, just like yoink, gone, right? And bam. Then if we go back to the phase 1, phase 2, phase 3, then you kind of like immediately transition into the phase 3, and then you get back to bright lights and
Right.
opening boxes and stuff like that. You're back to excited
Possible.
because it's
It's
playable
possible if you
cards.
ban like Warmongers, Tome, Codex, and cards like that, like right now.
Right.
It's possible you maybe get to Fab 3.0 quicker, but then, like I said, I think if a lot of decks lose those cards, I think the decks that are going to be good are the decks that get the most value out of Tunic, Command and Conquer, E-Strike, D-Reacts, etc. Because I don't think a lot of the new heroes are built out enough and do enough damage to play around those things. Like you look at Dash Max, Teklo, it just is
Mm-hmm.
the latest three. Like if Codex of Frailty goes, does that really make any of those heroes that much better? I think they still lose to Dromai for the most part. I think Bravo's still really good, into most of them. Granted, Mech Guardian, Dash Pistol Plan could beat up Guardians. I
Right.
think Azalea is still really good even without Codex. Icelander's still really good. A lot of these heroes are still really good until I don't think those heroes get propped up anyway. If you ban Tome, yes, it make Dromai worse, but we've seen even without Tome that Dromai was really good into a lot of these decks. Tome's only made it better.
Right.
That's my thing is you could ban these power cards. I don't necessarily think it's right or wrong. It's just that these cards were printed with things like Assassin in mind, who are criminally underplayed and underpowered. It's unfortunate um, if that's the case. And I think it's fine to have powerful cards like Codex, despite them being completely overrated or whatever people want to say. It's just that more heroes need them and more classes need cards like that. Because if the game was just everything blocks for 3 and everything attacks for 6, it would be very boring. I agree. Um, but I think the cool cards like Codex are cool because they add some swinginess to the game. They add a skill cap to the game. They add sequencing, nuance, things like that to the game. Same thing with Tome. Tome is not as I'm not saying Tome's a bad card, but it's not as easy of a card and good as of a card as people think. There is a deck, as you mentioned, a deck construction cost to it. There's a skill gap to playing Tome. I know LOL played Tome, cast Tome on yes, things like that happen. But cards like that I think are good. Codex isn't as brain dead as people like to make it out to be. We see people on stream misplay Codex all the time. I
Mm-hmm.
don't really mind cards like that, but I think 0 for 4 D react, you know, tunic counter, LOL, play, 3 of a kind for free, things like that. I think those are much more game swingy and deck defining and CNC. You can't play D reacts against this. Haha, I got to give me 2 cards, etc.
Right.
I think these are more defining of cards um, than the power of maybe Codex or Tome or something like that. Because it seems like they printed Tome to get Dromai out of the meta even faster than she already was going to be. So I don't know.
It does seem that way, right? I mean, just looking at the expansion slots and kind of how many of them were, I don't know how else to put it other than just duds, right? And then bam, I would say that she got the 2 best, right? Just for her, and that's
Yeah,
uh,
and as somebody
it's
said in
insane.
chat, yeah, I guess there are certain heroes or classes that are underrated. Assassin and Ranger, they're naturally underrated. So I think that is why, and to what I was saying before, is that Codex should stay around because once Lexi leaves, Codex is a good card, but it is not that great. It helps Azalea a little bit, yes, but it's not backbreakingly awful, like bringing back Endless Arrow and then looping it 16 times with Rain Razors or something like that.
Mm-hmm.
It's not as bad as bringing back Heat Seeker, tunicking it. I now get the Heat Seeker. I get a Ponder Heat Seeker trigger. Haha, I'm back on a 6-card hand. I think Lexi just abused that card too much, and I think cards like Codex should stay around because Assassin and Ranger are generally underrated, but they
Yep.
do different things and do things on a different axis. I don't think Codex should get banned at all. I think it's a power card that it only seems so bad because of
Because of
Lexi.
Lexi, right? Yeah.
Yeah, it only seemed that bad because of Lexi, and hopefully we'll see it is not that oppressive of a card going forward. So I think that card's fine, but I mean, yeah, I think going back to the other generics, I just think they're too strong. Like I said, I'm not the only person to have this opinion, and we could all be wrong. I just think the game would be more interesting, and there'd be more deck building considerations, and you'd see more cards in play. Because it's like if you print a new set, heavy hitters, and they print a bunch of 2 for 6s, the bar for a new 2 for 6 in your deck, if you want to play 6 red 2 for 6s in your deck, the bar's so high.
Right. Right. That makes sense. All right, boss. Well, I'm gonna answer a couple last questions and then close out the stream. But I sure do appreciate you joining me,
Yep, no
even though
problem.
I made you wait for an hour and a half, 2 hours.
Oh, I wasn't waiting. I was good thing. I don't know what you're talking about.
Yeah. All right,
I
man.
was listening on the TheCardGuyz Twitter.
That's it. Yeah. If you want more Vero, just join the Discord.
Yeah, sorry, you didn't. To be fair, you didn't get the best of me tonight. I was, my parents were over. I'm half distracted. You didn't get the best of me tonight, but I try to throw in some
That's all right.
good treats for the fans.
That's all right. That's all right. All right, man. We'll take care.
Yeah, I'll see ya.
All right, chat. So I'm going to answer a couple more questions if you have anything, and then I'll close us out. There's a couple things I needed to mention that got sent to me. Like I said, the whole point of this discussion is not to say the game's dying. It's not to say anything negative. The point of the discussion is to have a conversation and basically just talk about it. Like for example, the generic things. I think Pharaoh's point on generics is kind of off the wall. Me personally. Now, just about everything else he said was pretty based. I mean, from the design, the decisions on like a business standpoint, like a lot of that stuff was good. But the generic is a little wonky. But like, hey, it's a discussion to be had, right? Because like I said, the whole point, the reason that I'm concerned, the reason that I wanted to have this discussion was I believe in the game in phase 3. Everybody here does. I would say. And I think everybody believes in phase 3 in the direction that they're heading. I just think that there's an unnecessary bump on the way there is kind of the idea. Just to be clear, what you guys want is for every hero to be viable at all times at the same time. I personally don't think that's possible or desirable. I don't think we are necessary. I mean, all right, let's look at to address that question. Let's look at the living legend, right? Looking at point accumulation, right? Now let's take off. Let's just look at ProQuest numbers, right? So let's just remove the callings, right? So if you remove the callings, Dromai won a calling should be at 156, and then Azalea should be at 36. Okay? So if Azuri got 28, 36, 28, 76, 24, 46, 56, 36, 60, 256. Like 256 points. Not 60, not 46, not 76. It's just the delta between the best deck and the rest is where the problem lies. We don't want, you can't take 17 or 19 of anything and make them perfectly balanced. It's not going to happen. What you can do is, theoretically, is put thing in a smaller margin, right? Now, obviously, a lot of this has to do with they want Voltaire out, so they're like letting her do her thing. But ultimately, what I'm saying is that is led to a lesser ProQuest experience based on a survey that I did, which is not mathematically or statistically accurate. But it does give the perception that people are not going to events as much, right? Which is a concern for somebody that loves to play the game and wants to see the game thrive, right? That is the important part. That's the main point. I don't think anybody expects every single hero to be completely balanced. I think that'd be crazy. What is your personal over-under on Dromai hitting LL as things currently stand? Do you think she could ever fall out in favor? I think Heroes LL based on not large events, but actually small events. If you look at Iceland or Dash, these heroes are not cleaning house on small. Well, yeah, they've been around as long as they have while winning big events, right? Dash has won like 4 callings and she's only at 682. Right? A hero LLing is typically, I would guess, estimated more on its performance on a ProQuest RTN level than a calling or higher level event. It's my opinion. Uh, phase 3? You're saying that you don't believe in phase 3? You said phase 3, not me? I think everybody wants reasonably balanced heroes across the meta. I mean, not like all of them. Like reasonably balanced would be like, I don't know, a 30% delta in either way. I'm a huge issue that I haven't heard anyone mention that Dusk Till Dawn was an utter failure of a set. Half of it was unplayable draft chaff in a non-draft set. Meta wouldn't. Yeah. I mean, I would love to fight you on that one, but there were some playable cards. You had Carapace, you had Starstruck, you had Anthem of Spring, you had obviously that one wasn't playable for too long, but there were there were some cards that did impact heroes. Albeit 90% of them were not light or shadow, and I think like Brian's mentioned before in an interview, is the devs are kind of scared of Bolton and the whole Lumina combo. Maybe that means they just need to ban that so they can like actually take some risk. I don't know. I don't know the case there. That is kind of his identity though. So, but I mean, I would be curious what the set would be at if they didn't have the serialized cards. Just to be clear, that survey says 50% says they had average to above. That's just to be clear, that survey says 50% says they had average to above PQ turnout. It also says that half of the turnout was lower. I don't think you count the average. The average is not a consideration. I think what you only compare is the below average and the above average. Right? Average is no delta, no change, no difference, however you want to say it. And then above average, it grew 20%, and then it fell 50%. I mean, you can like lump it together like that, but I don't think that helps the analysis. Because you could flip that and say that it says 80% was average or below average, and then that would insinuate that basically there's no growth in the game. So I think you just ignore the average, in my personal opinion, and then just kind of look at these two. But like I said, at the beginning of the stream, I looked at the statistical inaccuracies with this data and how to not analyze it. And you don't just take the delta of these two. There's a lot more that goes into it that we don't have access to the data. And, there's a lot more to it than just a survey. I'm very keen to that. There also the call, like Summer mentioned, the calling was the lowest attendance we've ever had at a U.S. calling. 57 people didn't make the PQ drop in. Yep. I agree. Don't get me started on Carapace. uh, Bright Light seems somewhat underpowered, but always kept in mind that Icelander and Azuri were unplayable for almost 2 months after their sets came out. I mean, yeah. I don't understand the point there. Ban Courage, no shot. No shot. I think Dustle Dawn made Bolton Levia better. They just went from C. Yeah, I mean, they got upgrades, sure. We could also try doing hero cards restrictions instead of bans. Yeah, we talked about that earlier. It turns it into a higher variance format. Did you draw the silver bullet or not kind of situation. That just is what it is. I think your point about there being more LGSs and a wider spread was a good one. Yeah, but once again, also to count, like, there could be, we'll use the 2 areas that I'm the most familiar with, and I know because it happens in that one. It's not equivalent to everywhere else in the world. I get that. But it's 2 very good sample sizes. We'll take Tuscaloosa, Alabama, which is where I live, and Atlanta, Georgia, which is where I go to all my pro quests and stuff like that for the majority of them. There is, like, basically, so we had 3 card shops that were carrying Flesh and Blood in the Tuscaloosa area at one time, and now we're down to 1. In Atlanta, last season, they had 4 pro quest. Each one had an attendance of about 30 people. And this year they had 2 pro quest, and one had 13 people and the other had 18. Okay? So that is like, that's like a more rural area and then a more like metropolitan area. So like you kind of get a good sample in those, right? So just where, there could be more stores getting the game, therefore the attendance would decrease. I don't think that applies to ProQuest because LSS is going to throttle how many ProQuests are actually in the environment. You could have 100 stores sell Flesh and Blood in the New York area, but you're still only going to get 6 or 7 ProQuest, right? They're not going to run 3 of them a day every single day, right? So that's but like I said, it could just be our area thing. I'm more than willing to, and that's why I created the survey. I didn't want to just take that assumption and run with it. I wanted to ask people. I wanted to talk, and I read through every single comment. And basically what I got is 50% of the stuff that's in the US is having less attendance, but everything international is doing very well. That is basically the synopsis that I got from the comments left to the survey. Oh yes, we have mentioned plenty of times that they should have nuked Lexi before ProQuest. For no other reason than just make things fresh. I'm kind of bummed that there are not stat breakdowns for this PQ season. I don't know why they're not doing that. I know they hire people to actually do it, or at least that's what it was before. I think Breezy did one, and then they usually like just ask somebody. I don't know if LSS is actually doing them or not. I'm not entirely sure, but I do miss that as well. They had like the meta breakdown, the percentages, the top 8 numbers, all that, conversion rates. They gave it all to you in one article. Made it very easy to figure out what you need to play the next week. I would love Briar 2.0. Nothing would make me happier. Yeah, I thought it was really sus that they just kind of cut data post PT Baltimore. I mean, I would never accuse the company that they are not presenting data because it could be extra. But I mean, it's possible. I think that's kind of a. I'll give them the benefit of the doubt that that's not the case. Ever since Lexi has been at the top, we haven't seen any tournament data. Yeah, the only tournament data we've actually seen was somebody compiled an Excel sheet for all the nationals data, which was actually very well put together, and the numbers on it were her conversion rate to top, what was it, to top 8 was like actually astronomical. My point was, it's hard to evaluate the power level of new heroes because they sometimes take a long time for the community to figure out. More so than yes, but so I agree with that. I mean, let's look at what's the most extreme example that we can think of a hero that did nothing and was discovered in a new light that just broke the game. The only thing that I can think of is Icelander, right? And Icelander came out in Outsiders, obviously, right? And then when Hamilton came up with Bulllander, it revolutionized the game, right? And with that being the case, well, a lot of that had to do with the rotation of Prism. I think we knew she was a good hero, but the timing of Bulllander plus Prism rotating out was just like a recipe. 5 before Stubbies? I don't know about that. Fi won a calling 2 weeks after Uprising came out with Stubbies. Didn't he? But Icelander, so like 6 months, right? Well, Bolton, there's not been any headway on Bolton. Bolton's still not doing well. Leviah had an uptick in top 8s, but that's only because she was played more. Now she's right back to where she was, basically. Nobody's playing her. So, and those were heroes that were already figured out, right? You just had to plug and play, right? So, like, the thing about bright lights, and especially heroes like Tekla, you can look at the numericals behind it, and that's why I made a stream 3 days after the set came out, and I said Tekla was the worst hero in bright lights. And I think out of every metric we've seen, that has so far been correct. Now, I will stand and be corrected when somebody breaks it, sure. But so far, in current results, Metashare, every metric that you would want to look at, Tower Shard data, everything, it's been correct. So, it's just a numerical thing for the new heroes. They just don't have the value. ProQuests have been pretty hot in New York, but that's just one data point. Yep. I mean, I'm happy about it. Like, if your area is thriving, then like, awesome. E-Strike I can see because it's like Levi said, it's good, but not great either. I think FAB can be such a value-based game that it can strip hero identity. Absolutely. But I think that's kind of okay because Icelander kind of still feels like a wizard. You just have like an aspect of it that makes it different. I think that's okay. I think where I draw the line is like Briar, where half of the cards in your deck are literally generic because that's the only place you can go again. That would be but that revolves around her hero ability not having any contingencies based on elemental or Runeblade cards. Yeah, TCG had a hand count the LL points on the page updates to give us data. It was Erica. Okay. I mean, I will say the one thing that I do like about the articles that they're putting out is the. Let me pull it up real quick. The one thing that I do like about it is whoever did it was presented like solutions as well, right? Having problem with the dragons, look at these. Having problems with Azalea, look at these, right? So like I'm all for that. You know, that's like very good information. Just you know, no hard data, which that there could be another underlying reason for why that data is not there. There's no telling. There is no telling. How much of this decline in attendance is less about the game, more because the fact that people don't have money to spend on cardboard like they used to? Well, that definitely probably has to play a role in it, right? That's definitely an aspect of it. I don't know how much of that is like this impactful, right? And like all these comments were not, oh, it's just too expensive to travel. None of that. All I can analyze is what I see. And I try to look deeper than that, but like you can only speculate so much. I 100% agree that the economy is a factor in this number. But once again, we're talking about ProQuest and armories. You're not dropping a lot of money to go to an armory. I mean, I have to drive an hour and 15 minutes, but that's not everybody. Ravel's a good example. Yeah, but it requires deck building constraints. It's the only thing with Ravel. Icelander hasn't done anything lately. Yep, pretty much. Bro's been the only consistent thing about Flesh and I haven't been, so I couldn't tell you. See, yep. Ranger is fair besides Lexi. I agree with that. Azalea's pretty good, but I think it's manageable. It can be countered. There are cards in the game that can help most decks play against it. Lowering the power level, some folks are feeling the pains of the top being the same while they're injecting more into the bottom. I mean, that was my solution to kind of mitigate this phase 2, was kind of like to just hit a couple things to kind of freshen things up to keep people more interested as they move their way to the last phase kind of thing. That was my idea, but $4 hours. Oh, we've been going for a minute. At this point, we're about to see LL. Yep. Stop being. Jeez. Actually, might be a pattern with Lorcana release and events kicking off there. So that's another thing. Lorcana's OP program starts, I think, Q1 or 2 next year. So we need to get this game as good as humanly possible before that happens. Because if if Lorcana does have a excellent OP program, which I don't think it'll have one as good as Flesh and Blood. I think Flesh and Blood would be unmatched on that front. Um, my armies are so expensive. Yes, an hour and 15 minutes is the closest armory to me. That is a fact. And the next closest one is 2.5 hours. Yep, timing's awful. There's people toying around with the idea of format where we should allow heroes under 400 LO points or something like that just to shake things up. I don't know about doing that for competitive events because you're like forcing people not to play stuff and like you don't know what to practice for and stuff like that. That's the thing. Something about this just doesn't feel like it's burnout. I don't know. But I just want to thank everybody for joining me. I just wanted to present ideas, positive, negative, constructive, in between, whatever I possibly could, put the information out there. So that way anybody that wants to watch it, it's there. Right? And us as players, maybe there's something that we can do. Maybe we need to all get together and buy up all the Lorcana cards so nobody else can play with them. So that way they come play Fab. Something along those lines. But, I just, at the end of the day, all I want is James White, and I believe Brian as well, have talked about what they intend the game to be in the near future, right? They've talked about powering down, slowing down, all those things. I'm all on board with that. I've seen so many people around me, including Roger, that are not enjoying the game as much as they used to, whether because it's stale, because they think Lexi's broken, whatever the reason. The point is, but after Worlds, after Worlds last year, there was also this like kind of negative sentiment about the game, but it was because everybody was burnt out. But that's not the case here because what are we burnt out on? We had Nats like 2.5, 3 months ago, right? So I don't know what's causing it. And I'm concerned. I want what's best for the game. And like, it's as simple as that. Because I'm heavily invested, obviously. I make content for the game. I play the game on a very competitive level. And, I just want what's best for it. And hopefully I can provide every ounce of feedback that I can, whether it be what people want to hear, what they don't want to hear. They can take that as they will. But I'm just trying to do what I think can help the game. Simple as that. And if you have any ideas, please, the next time that you get on Twitter or X, whatever you would call it, and you voice an opinion, before you hit post, please just read it and ask yourself, is this constructive? Is it constructive? I almost said, is it classic constructive? Now, is it constructive? And, is there value to be gained from me posting this, right? And that's the best thing, because we talked about Brian a little bit earlier, and like we kind of hit on it about how like these people are passionate about this game. We all see that. We all know that. And when people complain about something you're passionate about, it, you know, it sucks. And it's easy to take offense to that. It's easy to get emotional about it and stuff like that. So I'm not going to hold anything against him. I just ultimately want what is best for the game. And I understand all these points. I just wanted to. Took a lot for me to do this evening. Yeah, well, I appreciate everybody being here. I really do appreciate it. And yeah, pour one out for Roger as well. We're going to miss him. And I hate to see him go, but it was just seeing his announcement was kind of what sparked this discussion for me personally. Because I don't know. It just felt different than burnout. I don't know what it was, but it just felt different. And I don't want that to happen to other people. Simple as that. Simple as that. Thank you, everybody, for joining me tonight. I really do appreciate it. And I'll see everybody on Wednesday for a more meta discussion. Probably talk about my deck selection for Worlds and whatnot. Take care, everybody, and have a good evening.